Get all your law school buddies together.
Okay, everybody pipe down.
Why?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Human Reaction Live Late Night. Actually, I guess this is the first one. It's not even another episode, really. We're glad to have you here. If you haven't seen the show before, Human Reaction ordinarily is your weekly source for independent commentary on news, politics, and culture, where it's always our mission to arm you with the tools you need to cut through media misdirection and resist the mono-narrative. But tonight, you can't count on us for any of those things. We're just going to be having fun and talking a bunch of shit. Low accountability. We do have a very special guest with us tonight. Very special, in fact. All the way from, I'm actually not sure where, Adam Thune, the all-star of our Discord, by far and away. How are you, sir?
You guys give my social media fix. I do it in Discord, so I don't, cause myself to get fired or whatever.
So you don't embarrass yourself publicly? It's just,
Well, I'd like to embarrass people that I know. Like, that's how I like to be embarrassed, like around my friends. You know what I mean?
In person. He's a 90s kid, right?
I'm a
He needs
90s
to do it
exactly
in person.
Well, and you also,
and on a message board.
On the positive side of things, you do bring a lot of, intellectual firepower to the Discord, other than just memes. You do bring some fire memes too, we'll say.
I mean, thank you. I appreciate it. One day I was actually thinking about this on the way over here. Like, you'll have to have this man behind the memes for your brother to show up here and tell his little story. Because I don't know this dude.
We have discussed
never
it.
Met this man.
We have discussed it. And when we can get him out here, we're for sure going to have him.
I feel like we have a connection together.
You do.
On the Discord.
That's right. I feel like there's going to have to be a live Human Reaction Discord meetup sometime. Maybe we can do like a live studio audience. Kind of fun.
That'd be fun.
Yeah,
I like that.
I know we were saying that we were going to get the gamers together to bully like the Chad Joe here.
I don't game
it was on the gamer episode.
Listen,
for a Chad who should be the bully of the situation, I sure feel like the nerds are ganging up.
We're a growing number.
That's like the whole nerd movie phenomenon.
That's
right?
true.
I mean,
that's true.
Yeah.
Aren't you?
Look,
like,
I'm a musician more than anything. Okay, I'm not a jock.
Is that not being nerdy? Like, what kind
Being
of
a musician?
There's a big difference.
Yeah.
Are you a musician or are you a band nerd?
Ooh, that's
two
true.
different kind of
That's true.
Like at
musicians.
trivia night, do you kill it? You're like, everybody watch out. I'm about to murder it right here.
Depends if it's like music trivia. Like
That's what I'm saying.
what band wrote the song, whatever.
Nerd, for
Maybe.
Sure. He's already there.
Right.
Yeah, I think being a musician is just being a nerd, but with like more drugs and alcohol.
No. That's. I mean, there's definitely a line to cross.
Yeah,
right?
if you're playing Warhammer 40K, I'm not sure it gets you the same kind of social prestige as if you're playing in a band.
What kind of
Even if
band?
you're doing drugs while playing 40K. Just saying.
That's true. Drugs in the basement, not maybe necessarily as interesting as drugs on
A
stage.
violinist, right?
Yeah.
Nerd. I mean, great nerd category, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Right.
Rock star,
Ben Shapiro.
right?
Different. Kind
Different,
of nerd.
right?
Yeah.
Both musicians.
Violinist probably
Right.
not doing drugs on stage.
I don't know. If
Maybe.
they're- I don't know what they're doing.
Just fancier drugs.
Maybe Adderall.
yeah, probably Adderall, right? Just staying in.
Designer drug. Legal
If
ones.
he's under 25, for sure. Adderall. Prescribed since 12, no
May or
doubt.
may not even know it.
One molecule away from meth.
Ah, yes.
Speaking of, your brother is here.
Sam, welcome.
Speaking of meth,
No, I was still on the previous conversation.
I like it.
I was still on the previous conversation.
Sam's just
Speaking
getting
of
shots fired
gamers.
over there.
Yeah.
So
look out, Sam.
Gamergate 2 continues to roll on. Speaking of gamers.
Yeah, what's the latest here? Because we did talk about that. Where are we at?
So more narrative design companies are being revealed like daily. It's very interesting, and kind of like the web of who went where after the last Gamergate is also kind of coming out and continues to be revealed. And there's just a tremendous amount of just bottom up pushback. Like it's still snowballing. I really thought this might be kind of like a flash in the pan, but it looks like it's still rolling pretty hard.
Yeah, because there was another group because before it was the baby. What was it called?
Sweet
Baby Inc.
Yeah.
Now there's like a Black Women Gaming or something, and there's a bunch of these like groups that are just kind of popping out into the ether right now.
I can't. Okay, I just have to get this off my chest. Every time I hear Sweet Baby Inc., I just think of barbecue sauce.
Yeah, Sweet Baby Ray.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's the?
Yeah.
Is that on purpose?
There was a beer in D.C. when I lived there called Sweet Baby Jesus. That was like a chocolate peanut butter beer that was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Guys, are we at peak woke?
God, I hope so. I've had about enough of it.
Did Hamas kill woke? This is an important question.
Well,
It just seems like everything like. Although I think that we might have a reversion if Trump gets elected again, it'll probably come back with a vengeance. But right now, it just seems like everything that's all the woke, all the LGBTQ stuff, all of these like being careful with your words on everything, like all those things are kind of on the decline right now, right?
I mean, do you think so? I mean, peak woke with the whole White House maneuver or whatever. I mean, sometimes I think that people just don't think. They just don't have that. Like, I can't believe, like, somebody's, like, example, this is probably intern, and they're like, did you know that it was Sunday when you tweeted that? Like, what? What? It's Easter? What? Easter? I haven't been to church since I was 6. Like, why would I know that? Right? Like,
That
I just
was a
think
weird
there's
thing, yeah.
You think it's that, or do you think it's, I'm going to challenge the
I
whatever?
actually think it was interest group politics in this case. So
Yeah, I
what that
agree.
was Obama actually created Transgender Day of Visibility.
Yeah, it started in like
But-
2009.
But
or
it was
something.
a different day in March, and because of the way the calendar worked, it just so happened that day in March was Easter
Right.
Sunday this time. And so, but I'm sure, I bet you that someone said, should we do this? And they were like, but the transgenders are going to come after us, bro. We can't let that happen. Therefore, we got to make it happen. And so they did. And they had to follow through because that's their constituent group, but they can't embarrass themselves.
There is also this thing because like it has been around for a while, and I've started seeing that where people are kind of, people kind of know what they're doing with this. Like there's a bit of a war game that's being had right here. But also I did a little digging into the actual day, and the history on it is very muddy. It seems like there's like revisions of history that are going on where some people are saying it was sometimes on March, like it was always on March 31st. Some people were saying like, oh, there was one on like April and things like that. And like I looked at the Wikipedia page, there seemed to be like a war that was going on over
Bunch of
this.
changes to it?
There's like some weird revision stuff that seems to be happening around this, and it's one of those things where I don't really know what's true with it because of the revision. stuff.
Well, am I wrong that there's like a lot of LGBT alphabet soup days lately? Like there's like 100+ days.
Well, they have a whole month.
So like the odds that it's going to land on a big Christian feast day are, not zero.
Oh, and happy Autism Awareness Month. That's what
Autism
we're in
Awareness
now.
Autism Awareness Month.
That's apparently what April is now.
Fun fact, most like neuroscience grants somewhere, if you write, like you just got to sprinkle in autism when you're doing like and this will help autism. Like people do that all the time. It's crazy.
just to get funding. It will help climate change and autism because I bet that's guaranteed.
Listen,
That is a
right there.
home run.
How climate
Speaking of
change is
peak woke.
affecting autism.
So
That is intersectionality right there, folks.
you say is a peak woke. Like I don't know about that, and I'll say that because still with grant, even more so now. The last grant we wrote, I wrote a little bit, but my boss is Russian. He's a Russian guy who goes to my parish, and then there's me. And so we had to write a diversity statement, which was, I don't know how he pulled it off, but he did. We got the money. So I don't know. I think it's because he's the only guy that can do this thing, that's going on. So I think that's part of it. But if that's going to continue to be a part of these funding requests, then it's going to continue to be a lens at which they can judge. So that's at the highest level
I agree.
of science institutions. So,
I think it's like two arcs, right? So you have like the institutional arc is going to be longer than the cultural arc, right? So the culture is going to peak, and people are like, all right, this discussion is getting lame. I don't believe this person's a transphobe because they're concerned about minors being unable to have children for the rest of their life after a surgery they don't understand affects them forever. And then there's like the institutions like ESG and DEI funding and government grants, which are going to last a lot longer and then eventually taper off as it catches up to culture, as people.
I just don't trust a lot of these institutional folks that are all of a sudden like now changing their minds about this 10 years later. People like the Bill Ackmans of the world. Like there's kind of there's this weird like now's a weird time to all of a sudden change bandwagons.
he's that investor folk, right?
Activist investor.
Like
yeah.
what did he do before he got that one girl fired or whatever? Because
I don't know anything about him. Bill
He's
Ackman?
just he's a big investor, like writes books on investments, Harvard Law type of stuff, or not Harvard Law.
But didn't
Harvard
he
wasn't he leading the
he-
charge against
he,
that
like-
gay girl? Or
well,
whatever?
he kind
Yeah,
of spoke
he,
up.
He was the one that led that.
He spoke up
Remember the-
against
he's
the
not- he's not in
DEI
the know.
stuff.
Yeah,
too,
like
didn't he?
her last name was Gay.
Oh.
Remember it was
I dropped that in
I
there.
thought you're just, that gay girl.
That gay girl. Yeah, her last name's gay. Was that not?
Got it. I know. I thought she was a lesbian. I thought that was what you
You
were
mean
talking
Claudine
about.
Gay?
Yeah,
Are you talking
Claudine
about
Gay.
yeah.
Yeah, it was
Gay, okay.
the plagiarism,
I'm
all that
following you
stuff.
now.
Are
got you. I'm on it. I'm on it. That gay girl.
Yeah, because like all of a sudden he became this like champion
the-
against DEI.
Like the dean of students at Harvard.
No, just
Oh,
the
no.
dean.
No,
that-
the dean. Yeah, the
Wasn't she the president?
You're right. President.
Whoever. Yeah.
The head honcho at Harvard.
One of the most prestigious, institutional chairs in the country.
Yes.
Gay
yes.
girl.
Okay.
That gay girl.
Gay girl.
Yeah, the gay girl. And to your point, is she gets put there, and some people say, and I would say, well, let's ask that question: did she get there? Is she a diversity hire? Well, either way, how dare me? However, she broke the sin of sins on the East Coast. Like, what'd you do? Well, you didn't defend, all holy Israel. So, got to go.
And Bill Ackman is a big person on that.
Oh, really?
Which is interesting.
Interesting.
So
Is it?
he is
Very
now
interesting.
he has now come out against the transgender. He's against woke ideology sort of thing.
DEI stuff. Like he's become like when Mark Cuban was doing his virtue signaling against like everybody on Twitter a while back.
It was Elon, wasn't it?
It was, but it started off with Bill Ackman because Bill Ackman did this. I used to be the same way, and then I looked into it, and then it sparked all of this stuff.
Got it.
And then that was when like the Mark Cuban versus Elon back and forth on the DEI stuff started happening.
Your original point that you're skeptical that people are just now kind of coming around to it, I get that. On the other side of it, I did listen to Jordan Peterson talking to Michael Schellenberg about the WPATH files, where Michael kind of says, look, I have a lot of progressive friends. I used to be progressive in a lot of ways, and I was initially very skeptical that this wasn't blown out of proportion. Because social panics do happen over small things, like for example a social panic around shooting video games that shoot people and mass shootings, right? And every now and then there'll be this panic and everyone freak out, but it's not really a big deal. It's not as big a deal as they make it seem. So he kind of put it in that category, miscategorized it, and then has now realized, oh wait, this is a systemic and big problem. So now I'm kind of changing my views.
I'll say I'm not skeptical of all people that have changed their mind,
Right.
because a lot of people are going with the culture, and a lot of people don't actually think on it, like the way that you said.
What?
But there was
Gay girls.
a lot of people don't actually think about these things through, and it takes a lot of time for them to come to certain conclusions. There's just very specific institutional actors
Right.
that. And a lot of these investor types and things like that are kind of going with the wind on things that I'm a little sketched out
The
by.
wind that means money.
Money
The
and-
money.
yeah.
It's no longer the money. It might be more. What does it say? Abundant if I ditch this, or I can see which way this is going. Like you said, if you think it's peak woke, and let's say somebody like Bill Ackman, who I would guess
who studies market trends.
not an idiot, right? Not an idiot. Has a whole probably team of people like, hey, sir, listen, that woke crap is going away. So it's like, oh yeah, totally ditch this. You want to be in front of this? Like I do want to be in front.
Yep.
Right? I don't know if it's that, or what I like to think about too sometimes is when you attend a certain thing, like somebody might have brought up, this is how you should think about it, and just think you're attending to that, or you have new friends. Right. And we all act this way. And so that starts to change your mindset. Right. And so once you see things differently, like new stimulus comes in, now I can see it for what it is. Right. Red pill, classic red pill definition. Right now I can see it differently. Maybe that happened to
You
him.
see the code of the matrix.
You can see the code. You can see the zeros and ones.
Right.
Right. That are going
But see,
on.
but that's binary. You can't. We're not
Well,
living
that's
in a
what-
binary world anymore.
We're on one right now in this live stream. What are you talking about? It's digits, right?
We're all non-binary here.
Goodness gracious! What the hell else do we have to talk about other than
What do we have?
wokeism? I'm over wokeism personally.
So
I mean,
it's
obviously,
Joe is peaked. He's
I have
woke.
peaked. I peaked long ago.
He sold out. He sold
Like
that
a
bag
lot.
a long time.
I
Those
did.
stonks.
I
are
sold
out.
the top and dumped my bags on
What if
retail.
there's a woke coin?
Oh, I'm sure of it. I mean, woke, actually for a minute there, I feel like actually was a positive thing. It meant awakened, legitimately, right?
Well,
and then it just got totally
I used to
ruined.
use the term to be being woken up to the deep state and things
Yeah,
like that, right?
exactly.
But then there was culturally it became what do you think about the gays? That became what it was.
Kyle
right?
and I's failed podcast, on one of our first episodes, was what does woke actually mean? And we were like, no, what it means.
Around the clock sex. It's all,
all
come
of it.
on, man.
We were it's about knowing that the Fed exists and it's a cartel, right, and privately owned. That was what we were trying to say what it was, obviously, and all 5 of our listeners agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because I used to think it's because I always put it to the Matrix, which was just waking up to reality and what reality actually is. So if
Right.
you're kind of based and understanding of that type of stuff, then that's woke. And I would say woke about things. I was like, oh, that person's super woke because they're like awakened in a sense. But now it just became like, what are your views on trans people, right?
Is it interesting that the language kind of forced it into a duality, woke versus based, as opposed to when it was kind of like almost a synonym, it became an antonym?
Because which is interesting too, because based it actually means like being grounded in something. Like that is actually where the meme terminology comes from, is like it's like having like solid axioms at the base of your worldview. So when people say it's based, like people just kind of use it as a term now, but but that's what it originally kind of
So your
meant.
accusation is Bill Ackman's not based. He's just pretending to be based.
Well,
What you
he
mean?
might be very based. He just might be very
We
Machiavellian.
are so accessible to Gen Z right now.
Are we?
On
Yeah.
God, for real.
No cap.
No cap.
Someone dab, please.
You know, I
Nah.
I teach like the youth below or whatever, because like I'm assuming high school students, most of them don't get it out, and at least I don't understand what their culture's like, you know. But I'm teaching at this level, so I don't know if I would land. I'll have to drop some of that garbage and see what they
Oh,
do.
do it. Yeah.
Just be like, on God. That was great. On God.
On God.
Well, now people want to know, what do you teach when you're teaching?
I teach at I don't know what I would call it. I'll call it a hybrid high school, but I teach chemistry, biology, and entrepreneurship there, of all things. I'm done teaching soon because I took a job at the university, as I talked about, with the grant, and that'll take up most of my time. So I'm ending soon, but yeah, I teach these young folks. It's a
Without you, we're only gonna have woke teachers left. Why you can't leave?
I don't know if that's true. I mean, I'm not at a public school, so I don't know. I don't think everybody in public school, like David's brother, I wouldn't say, who teaches history, would probably not consider himself woke.
His case, he actually, at least in his school district, he's like, it's like a tenth of them are like that. But there are a couple that are like major ones, if I remember them right.
Well, and usually it's a loud minority that is, like your average teacher doesn't
What?
just.
This is why we needed wokeness to begin with, Kyle.
He's Canadian, folks. He doesn't know about what his
This is
words
why
mean.
I'm speaking a different language here.
He was referring to the other kind of minority.
I mean, like a minority of opinion.
Yes.
It's not allowed. Minority.
Guys, thanks for watching. We are going to be out of here off of YouTube ASAP.
We should go live on Rumble for that
Yes.
sort of talk,
Yeah,
right?
just go preemptively follow us on Rumble. This isn't going to last
We've
long.
already canceled.
No, because like your average teacher is just like they're just going through, they're doing their job and stuff,
Right.
but there's like a loud minority that ends up on limbs of TikTok.
I'm trying not to laugh. It's just too funny.
Don't laugh.
Well, how much like academic freedom does like your brother have? I would wonder.
In Montana, quite a bit.
In Montana,
Yeah,
quite a bit.
in Montana, quite a bit. In the sense of like, they're standardized testing on kind of stuff, but where we're at, in different districts are different too. It's also
I was gonna
where
say
he's at.
Belgrade District.
It's a county area rather
Oh, sorry.
than like.
Am I outing him?
No, I'm just saying
You just
counties are
doxed
different
him.
than
I just
city
doxed your brother.
schools. There's all kinds of different stuff. So
Bleep that out, Bennett, quick.
okay, he's ready for you.
Yeah, you missed it. Weren't we live? But
Yes.
what about Bozeman? Do you think that because the curriculum's top down directed by some levels?
Yeah, I would have to ask him. I don't know. It definitely changes per district, changes per school, changes even per department in some cases.
Well, his
Like math is tighter controlled than other things.
since we're doxed him already, like when you think about history, like history is so obviously dense. Like you have to cherry pick stuff, and how you cherry pick and what order you talk about it and what emphasis you weigh is this. It'll give you a whole different perspective, right? So like you're gonna look at history. Like one thing I don't like about how modern history works, right? If I'm gonna get on the soapbox, is they pretend there's no view from like there's not a like there we have a view from nowhere about history. Which that's not true. You can't have a view from nowhere.
What do you mean by view from nowhere?
So like when I say there's no view from nowhere, like you're pretending like you're outside of a system that people are in when they wrote about these things, did these things. Like that's not how reality actually works. These people
You mean
were
like
a part of it.
like history is written by the victor, sort of like
I mean,
mindset?
You could certainly call it that way, but
Mm-hmm.
as far as every story's got a storyteller. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
This-
So like you can't not. And then so when you look at this in science, same thing. There's no view from nowhere. This really gets hashed out. I think some of you guys, popular culture wise, like understand like the observation of a thing may change the measurement down at the quantum level, for example. But when you get to these higher levels of science, like your view from how that study's done is in the method section. right? So this is what I would say to people who like to reference studies or like read somebody's reference. If you don't understand how the methods happened, then don't read anything else because you're not going to get. Otherwise, you're just getting probably either your misconception or their propaganda, one of the two.
Yeah, because it always just comes down to this, like, well, studies said, but like you can make studies say a lot of things. Like there's the grievance studies hoaxes, right, with James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, and all that stuff, where they just start making things up and being like, "Yep, dog humping in Oregon parks are showcasing rape culture," and you're like, "Yep." That's
Well, this is where you think woke, like it's one of those things. Like maybe we had to go through it because what I like about wokeism. That's right. I'm gonna say something nice. Is it exposed the white coats that they're not real clerics?
Yeah,
is what I mean by that.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
so
These new sounds are lit.
I
Well
know,
done,
man.
sir. You're on it.
I was scared about that one. I was worried about it. Like, what? Who's talking to me? Is
somebody over
is
your
there a
shoulder?
demon in my mind? Like, what?
somebody over your
Uh-oh.
shoulder's just like, "Wow,"
The disembodied Owen Wilson narrator of your life.
like I'm schizophrenic.
I mean, what was nice is pre-COVID, you had stuff like I remember there was a conference for the neuroscience of white fragility, right? That came out right before everything hit the fan, and that was like ramping up. Don't get me wrong; they've been a disaster. They're not fixed. But
Whites or
both, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, look at like everybody's got guilt apparently, especially if you're on the left. That's what you do. That's your whole identity.
I'm feeling pretty fragile personally, so
But I sold that fragility in peak woke.
you sold it.
dumped his bags.
I dumped my bags on that one.
That's right.
Yeah, that's why he was talking about the loud minority.
I know.
Yeah, but like, do you think?
I'm buying the bear.
So I think the WPATH files are like the
Enlighten me
final
on the
killing blow.
WPATH file. Excuse me. Yeah.
So WPATH files came out 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
You gotta watch the podcast, bro. We covered it. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I
I'm
feel
kidding.
like I
So
listened. I'm wearing the hat. What else do you want from me? I'm giving you my life.
yeah, you gotta listen every time. All 2 hours of my rambling. No.
Speaking of which, everybody, really quick, if you'd like to get your own hat, humanreactionpod.com.
we are
Anyways,
10 subscribers away from
carry on.
900 on YouTube, by the way. So
8.
share with your friends.
8 subscribers.
8?
Are these 8 in the live stream going to subscribe? They better be already.
Yeah.
They
Come
have
on,
to
get
in
subscribe
here,
to
guys.
watch.
Get
you
in
gotta
here, guys.
subscribe, yo. So, WPATH files. What happened is there's an association, an international association for basically the surgeons who conduct transgender surgery transitions, as well as what's the medical term? Basically, hormone specialists who often administrate the hormone blockers.
Endocrinologist or whatever.
You're the brain surgeon or whatever.
Also, urologist. Like, there's a urologist, folks, that get involed with this, and if you would think like, oh, why would that be? But then think about it a little harder, and you'll understand exactly
Anatomy's
why.
a factor. Yes.
Basic anatomy.
Yeah.
So basically, these files are leaked to Michael Schellenberger, who is on Substack under Public. He's a former environmental activist who realized that the climate change policies were irrational and put out books, and then got ostracized by the left, and then he's kind of moved into this really awesome
We'll
position.
get back to that.
He's also one of the key
Pin that for
figures
me.
on the Twitter files. Anyways, so he then basically kicks it to his think tank, Center for Environmental Progress, to analyze these files to ensure their authenticity. And basically what it shows is these doctors have completely left behind consent. They pretty much say stuff like, oh, there was a 12-year-old and they wanted hormone blockers, and I tried to explain to them, I had to first explain to them that would make them infertile, and then I had to explain to them how children are born. Right. So they didn't know, they're too young to actually understand the implications of these actions, and then they still gave them the hormone blockers.
Ugh.
Right. And their amount of unscientific follow-up on people who regretted transitions afterwards that were permanent.
No.
There's like, oh yeah, we talked to someone 2 weeks after we, changed their bottoms.
Sure.
And they were,
This should have been
14,
easy to know,
16,
right?
that
Because
age.
some people regret tattoos. Like, how hard is this to know this would happen?
Yeah.
Right? It's
Well,
not hard
Sometimes
to
I
know.
regret what I had for lunch.
Yeah, but if you ask a tattoo artist, he's going to be like, yeah, they regret it, but I mean,
That's what the surgeons are like. But
Uh,
I got paid, so I don't give a shit, right?
yeah. Well, and some of it's like some of the best attack angle vector on it at minimum is medicine should do no harm, all right? And there needs to be clear consent, and children aren't capable of consenting in this way because there's a blind corner around what it means to have children that you just can't conceptualize
I
when
think
you're 14.
That's the key, though, right there, is that there was this, this idea that they were preventing harm because of the statistics around suicide or all those sort of things.
Which
regarding
turned
How
out to
was that
also be bullshit.
statistics?
Exactly.
God, what was
As
the methodology
What-
behind those statistics?
Well,
Well, what it
exactly.
turned out is they just associated all death, all suicide by people who were depressed and confused, like identity confused, and they used identity confused as the same as gender confused.
Right.
So and what's interesting about that is teasing apart identity confusion, like I don't know who I am without my wife or husband or something like that if they die, as the same person as I'm 22 and if I don't change my body, I'm going to commit suicide. Like that's not the same person with the same problems, but we're going to treat the same in the statistics for justifying this phenomenon.
Right.
Well,
so it was
here's-
all made up.
Yeah.
Well, to tie it all together. So when you say, are we at peak woke? I'm going to say no, we're not. And then I'll tell you why. And I got plenty to say on the whole mutilated children that can easily get myself fired. And I'm okay with that if that's what happens. Right? I got that military
We'll save that
retirement,
for
baby.
after the
Like, that
paywall.
stuff's not getting touched. Like, you can do. I have to
what
do a
you learned,
lot.
Dad.
I don't know what regime's taken over, so let me retract that. Strike that from the record in
Might be.
2 years. But what I'm saying is, so what is true? Likely, like yes, I understand what this WPATH stuff is, and I understand that happened. But more times than not, the parents are going, "Yep, right. I'm going to do this." So they are giving informed consent to parents. And so here's why peak woke's not over, because those parents got to live with that forever.
They have to double down on
So,
on their
like,
on their
I think,
decision.
Like Roman Empire went from republic to empire. One reason, or not the only reason, obviously. So Augustus wins, Octavius wins, and then he's young and he lives for like 3 generations worth longer. And so people just didn't remember the republic. But these people are going to fight this decision as the right thing until they're dead.
Yeah.
And so since we're moderns and we want to keep people alive forever for reasons I don't understand, but even at force, but we will. So these people are going to live for another 60 years, some of these parents,
Yep.
right? And so we will fight this that long. And so whether it's on its way down or whether it's going to plateau, I don't know about that. As far as like all the rest of it, like it's horrific what they do, but they do it.
Yeah, because this is one of those things where you can't really, once you've gone through with it and putting your kid through it, you can't really change your mind about it because like you have to do some serious self-reflection to actually get there. And most people are just going to double down. That's how most people are.
Right. I mean, it's like the vax, and I'm not going to like. I go past the vax at this point because I feel bad for some people that really believed in science. Like, oh, it's their own church, for a while.
Turn the friggin' frogs gay.
Exactly. So what ended up happening there? Like, I'm okay with the fact that they panicked and shot their children who were 2, who had no or whatever version, like 6, 8, and there might be some
With
side
the
effects.
vaccine, not actually shooting children, but
Yeah, just give them the shot.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And
Same
so,
thing.
like you, and like you can hear people double down on that.
Yeah.
Right. Even though the younger you are, or maybe the more healthy you are, the more silly that sounds. They'll still double down. Okay, so that's like a mini version of what you're going to deal with this woke stuff. But when it comes to, I like the woke. How many times can I say woke? What I like about the woke thing is it exposed everything in the sense of like, now you look at like, okay, let me remind you that we did COVID, right? We found the bats that could, in a fantasy world, be, maybe transfer SARS. So what we're going to do is we're going to take their genetics, we're going to humanize them. And then we're going to mess with them and see if we can come up. And if we get a good vaccine, we'll vaccinate the bats. That's what they said. And so that direct study wasn't funded, but a bunch around them were. And oh, by the way, it's my favorite kind, which is happening to a lot of primate research, is everything's going to China for all the reasons you can guess, right? Some reason labor goes there. Lower standards, right? So cheaper, right? Gets so, I mean, this is the scientific community's monster. Right. So it doesn't shock me that they freaked out, and it doesn't shock me that people who worship science, which us moderns do, right, were deluded by this. And so now, like I say all that to say, when it comes to this woke stuff, like, it's horrific that we've got there, where people feel like they can just change material out and I can put whatever meaning I want in it, as if those two things aren't united.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the crazy thing is that we paid for it with your tax dollars. Like the NIH paid for the things
And
around this that probably created COVID.
Paying for it is a really interesting question, and I want to circle back to this, Adam. So really quickly though, I just want to acknowledge the chat because we have
Oh,
Hannah in here now who's asking really quick. Is white fragility the same as blonde fragility? And we're gonna have to ask a question back to you, Hannah. What is exactly blonde fragility? I think you may be qualified to answer that, right? More than any
I have
of us.
no idea what her actual hair color is.
I mean,
right
how
now.
many-
Could be red, could be blonde. Who knows?
In the chat, what the heck is blonde fragility? Sam is also taking credit for us getting 8 subscribers away from 900.
Hey,
So
Sam.
everybody,
Atta
keep up
boy.
with Sam and invite
The
a
meme
friend.
master.
And yes, Hannah, we are all over the place. We are ADHD because we're off script. It's after hours. We don't have any rules.
Yeah.
Go f yourself.
They didn't feed us Adderall.
Respectfully.
That was Elon saying that.
It was not us.
Oh wow. That
Absolute.
sounded so much like I thought he actually said that.
Absolute chaos. Okay, so apparently.
Hey, Hannah's saying somebody clearly hasn't seen the Barbie movie. We have been
Oh.
requested to do a Barbie movie review before.
Oh man.
Has anybody here seen the Barbie movie?
I have not.
David has.
I am sorry to report. I've seen that.
And you
piece
didn't
of
get the
propaganda.
reference, the blonde fragility reference?
No.
You didn't pay that close attention then, Dave.
He was screaming in his head the whole time. Like, oh,
The whole time.
I'm making her go to Doom 2. I'll fucking go to this movie.
No, we went to
I'm
Dune
going.
2.
Yeah, I went with the bros, dude. Yeah, that was, yeah.
Oh, you did?
You were one of the bros for Dune 2.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I thought you went with the bros to the
To
Barbie,
Barbie movie? No,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we all held hands the whole movie. It was
Well,
great.
something that Adam was just saying about it, like the worship of science, it actually made me think of this Richard
Oh,
Dawkins
this happened
video
this
that
week.
just came, where he's talking about how he wants to live in a Christian, Richard Dawkins.
let's
one of
watch
the-
it.
it's
I
Richard
bet you
Dawkins, just
do,
for people that
Richard.
don't know who he is, one of the 4 horsemen of new atheism. all of that.
Invented the word
memery
meme.
that happens.
That's
Yeah, I guess
Ish.
Yeah, ish. Right. Invented the
popularized
word
it,
meme.
maybe.
But yeah, there was an interesting clip of him talking about the cultural Christian nature and how we're losing it.
Well, I must say I was slightly horrified to hear that Ramadan is being promoted instead. I do think that we are culturally a Christian country. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer, but there's a distinction between being a believing Christian and being a cultural Christian. And so, I love hymns and Christmas carols, and I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. I feel that we are a Christian country in that sense. It's true that statistically the number of people who actually believe in Christianity is going down, and I'm happy with that. But I would not be happy if, for example, we lost all our cathedrals and our beautiful parish churches. So I count myself a cultural Christian. I think it would matter if we substituted any alternative religion. That would be truly dreadful.
Well, which brings me to my supplementary point, which is that, as we know, church attendance is plummeting, but the erection of mosques across Europe, I think 6,000 are under construction, and there are many more, are being planned. So do you regard that as a problem? Do you think that matters?
Yes, I do really. I mean, I don't. I have to choose my words carefully. I mean, if I had to choose between Christianity and
He
Islam,
should
I
choose
choose
his words carefully on
Christianity
this.
every single time. I mean, it seems to me to be
The new atheists
fundamentally
hate Islam
decent
so
religion,
much.
in a way that I think Islam is not.
That's actually a really interesting thing.
They hate them.
Is the disdain that the new atheists like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins have for Islam, but they're like completely cool with Judaism, and they're kind of like a little bit of hatred towards Christianity. It's like minor hatred, but in relation to the Islam thing. That's something I've noticed too.
Yeah, the Judaism is a rabbit hole we can dive down and all, get kicked off. We want
Members only.
Behind the paywall. Behind the paywall.
but behind the paywall. I mean, we can. I mean, so what I would
But
say.
why do they hate Islam is the question.
That's a great question.
Why do they hate Islam? I mean, I don't know. I'm probably look at data like this. That guy sounds delusional because he says, "I want this." Like, I'm really sad that I'm losing this culture, but I'm really glad people aren't going to church. Like, those aren't separable things
Yeah,
to me.
if
Like,
people
what are you
don't go to
talking
church,
about?
what happens to the church
Yeah,
buildings?
who's going to build the churches, Richard? Like, what? Like, aren't you the meme guy? Like, what the hell are you talking about?
Who will build the churches?
Well, I really don't want anybody to go to the churches, but I'm kind of sad they're gone. Like, what do you, you know what I mean?
But from his point of view, and one of the things that does bother me about this is that this was reported by a lot of Christian internet people as like, ooh, he's a Christian now. But he's actually called himself a cultural Christian for a very long time. It's actually an old stance that he's had forever. And he's just kind of clarifying like applying that standard to the moment, which I think is fair. But I do think they're like drawing on your hypocrisy point. It kind of stands on the tolerance built by a combination, to be fair, of pagan and Christian virtues that created the world where we say, hey, no religious wars, and if you don't believe, we're not going to burn you at the stake. But then he says, but all this Islam rising up is just is a problem. Like
I'll push back on right away. There's two things I'll say. Number one, the 30 Years' Wars between Catholics and Protestants, that's to really fight about. It wasn't pagans back then. Like, it's literally why things are so touch and go is the 30 Years' War. It's one reason the founders said what they said in the documents. They were horrified, and they should be, because it was basically a giant civil war between Protestants and the Catholics all across Europe.
Well, and also that created a lot of intellectual kind of boundaries, saying, oh, wait, if we don't fight about this, here are all the good things that will happen. Like this was written by Montesquieu and lots of the legal tradition, Blackstone, people like that informed the founders too. So it's not just the wars. It was the wars that then created an intellectual movement that created our current definitions that we call tolerance is a word. I know Kyle hates it, but it's like the best word for it.
Well, the other thing
that's a psyop. The whole tolerance.
He's wrong. He's wrong because some churches are filling. Like, he's wrong. Like, I've seen this with my own eyeballs. Like, he's just not right.
In London?
Like in London, it depends on the sect. Like, you throw the word like cultural Christian around. It's like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? You're from the West? Because that's true. You're West. Like, you're a Protestant culture. Even I'm so bad now, I will say even the new atheists are a form of Protestantism. Like, it's their version of attracted to the good. Like, I decided what good is, right? And I'm going to go to that. I'm going to build my church, which they do. And they have their own saints, right? They have these people. One of them's Darwin, for example. If we're talking to these people, like, say something bad about Darwin. Say something bad about one of these saints they have, and they'll defend it just like anybody else does. I mean, it's no different than like people who use libertarianism maybe ways. Like, say something bad about Ron Paul. I dare you. Like, to some people,
how dare you, sir?
I'm not going to fight this crowd. I get it.
I completely agree.
How dare you, sir?
This is Ron Paul's house.
But I mean, he's not a saint in the actual way. And like Rothbard, like, you can keep going down like Mises, like, you can go down this road and people will fight you.
We're moving towards polytheism, right? Like, where everybody just has their own little pantheon that they're
you just triggered Adam.
Well, I mean, polytheism is fun because like the ancient Israelites and Orthodox Christians and Catholics, like, you have like the Most High God, and then you have angels and demons, which are considered deities. So like, where is this, where like people categorize monotheism in these ways? If you talk to somebody who's Hindu, which is like a collection of a bunch of different kind of things, they'll say maybe they're monotheist. Or they'll say all kinds of things.
Yeah, because they all combine into one.
Well, like, they'll like, this is what I mean. Like, they'll like absorb it in, like, oh, this is the highest God or whatever, and everything else is like underneath.
Well, there's all kinds of tribes that probably happened in. Like, there's evidence that happened to Norse pagan religions. There's evidence that it actually happened in Judaism.
Yeah.
There's evidence all over the place.
So North is fun.
That's kind of the interesting part of these groups bumping into each other, tribes kind of forming larger ones. There's a great book about this, Weird.
Yeah.
The weirdest people on the planet. It's about Western, educated, individualist,
industrialized.
Industrialized. Yeah. One of the interesting part of that book is their section on religion, where it kind of talks about like, this is a common view of the anthropology. I'm not saying it's the only one. That there's that kind of combining of it to a Most High is a very common set of rational beliefs that's just in different stages in different places. We get Odin, we get Yahweh, we get Krishna in Hinduism. Right. Like, each one of those are.
The Norse one is fun for me because Norse history is only written by Christians post.
Yes.
Like, we have like we have like stories, right? But anything written down was written from after the Christianization of the place, right? So I don't know how much that goes, but to go to the weird thing, like, they call it something else. I forget the silly acronyms people use, but that's like a big concern about most science.
Right.
Is like most subjects are WASPs, for lack of a better word, like white Anglican, Protestant rich kids,
usually sophomore.
Well, because like at Dartmouth, and Harvard,
which actually goes to the W path. A tremendous amount of the people in that are all college students, and then they apply the college students' rationale to 14-year-olds. That was another part of the W. I'm sorry, I just suddenly remembered that.
Open that up a little bit.
So
what
they
do you mean?
study depression in 22-year-olds who are drinking alcohol and doing drugs and doing all kinds of things to 22-year-olds, and then they apply the outcomes to 14-year-olds.
Oh.
You know, of a very specific collegiate demographic, which is way different than like all the diversity of demographic in public schools all across the country of 14, 16, 15-year-olds.
It's so fraught.
Yeah.
Which actually brings
We're
me
actually
back to the.
getting away from your point. I didn't mean to do that. Totally diverge.
I'm totally gonna continue
I'm a
to
guest.
go
You
all the
guys
way
do-
back
This is your podcast, man.
because I want to get back to the question I wanted to ask you, which is there some kind of renaissance or redemption that science as a practice can go through? Is there hope
Yeah, I
for science to evade the control that money has sort of applied to this capture that's going on within the scientific space?
That's a big question.
How do you
Also,
get out of
isn't
it?
money necessarily?
Well, so I would say a couple
Good
things.
question.
One, I would say, so for example, if you make money off of something or whatever, like is this part of, and you think you're doing good with it, like let's take something we may not agree about and we can come into it later. Social media, right? If you're profiting off of social media, you probably are super not happy with any kind of banning, any kind of anything about it, right? Where maybe if you're not, or you see things from a different angle and you see only the damage, you might only hate it, right? And of course, both are true, right, in some way, right? When it comes to the science part, I think how it redeems itself is it understands its proper context, right? And that's going back to this, every story's got a storyteller. That's one part. And so sometimes the storyteller is a machine, right? We can observe these things with these ways, and this can tell this story. But more often than not, like the money is a little bit corrupting, just like I'm sure it is in politics, and that's something you guys know better than I do. But you're like the publish or perish mindset in the institutions right now. You have to publish results and be something new and edgy. Like there is so many, what do they call it, the file drawer problem, where most research goes into the file drawer never to see the light of day. Nobody publishes that stuff.
Also called the replication error problem, right? Where
Well,
all these studies come out and then no one ever replicates it, so it never actually achieves science, because science itself is unverified unless it's replicated.
Well, yeah, there's two separate problems. There's the problem of, say I have this hypothesis, I do this grant, I'm like, okay, let me get all this data, and like, oh, it turns out I'm super wrong. It's just the same. Like no like paper publishing entity, which is fascinating because public funds, but I have to pay to get it. Isn't that weird? But like, so nobody's going to publish this paper.
Don't think about that too much.
Don't do it. Because it doesn't say anything that's new or interesting, right? And so, I mean, they do have separate mechanisms for this now. You have open source, but
Yeah.
you know, for the most part, it goes into the file drawer. Where the replication crisis, like, yeah, to fund someone to redo something, right? Like, no, actually, I call garbage. Like, this is garbage, right? To get an actual funding source to help you with that. This is actually where you and I will really disagree. This is where I actually think like bigger things like the government, if it was all holy, would say, no, we're going to fund to make sure like you're not pumping out garbage, because the damage of not doing that is not understanding what a boy and a girl is and child mutilating people. When you start to let these people go on with all whatever published garbage that they did right away, like, oh man, we got to protect the kids from killing themselves.
So the
what
government-
we're going to do is we're going to change their material around and pretend like this is going to, like what I'm saying is, because no private actor will do this, like almost impossible, this is where I see where state institutions can do this. Now they don't do this, right? Same problem. It's still like at the end of the day, everyone's in their own money making. Like there's a lot of web there. There's a lot to entangle. Like,
Sure.
it's not as easy
Oh
as
yeah.
you think.
So
But-
people actually have a mental model about scientific research, for example, that the only way to do long-term or base science research is through government funding and grants too. One of those like fundamental premises is probably false. Most general science research was done by tinkerers and experimenters
Yeah, the
who
good ones.
discovered like something marketable, put it through the private sector, and then we discovered the laws of these various different things after the fact. One of the interesting components of that is that's risky, and we have such a risk-averse society, we can't allow that anymore. So we have to put everything through this like really controlled situation where you can't do tinkerers, you can't do like amateur scientists doing the things that they used to do. And so we say science can't be practical for people anymore as we close off all the ways which traditionally science was practical for people and had reason to duplicate results. Because if someone was doing something interesting with a new material or had a new premise or synthesis that you could do, well, now you copyright everything.
Sure.
120 years ago, 150 years ago, you didn't copyright anything. Right, so the things that copyright are so hard to enforce, especially internationally, that there was all kinds of duplication. Why? Because you wanted to see if you can get the same results, so that you could take advantage in the marketplace. We've we've decapitalized science, and that's actually what's made it worse because we've collectivized it into like a state program.
Wow.
Let me give both devils their due. So one devil I'll give a due is like there is I don't know how often wars happen without the state apparatus. Again, like you and I can argue for hours about like I think just the state's inevitable. You can't. It's just like
Sure.
you're asking me like, oh, is there? It's like a relationship kind of thing to me. Like there's a government, right? There might be warring governments, but there is one. You're in the system of government. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just what naturally emerges between when you have all these people and all that. Something's gonna do that public peace, right? So the war aspect of things, like that gives like incentives can happen even with state things. Like that's just true. Like a lot of tech comes from the war thing. And I don't know if we showed it live, but like the little train on the moon thing. Like when you do those projects, like the scientists will sit there and this is where they'll get holier now. Like we're definitely going to get a lot of great tech out of this. Like I know it sounds silly, but we might benefit off this for years or whatever. Now, that probably in this case is garbage. They're just utilizing what happened during warfare in a lot of ways. Like a lot of great, like example, radar, for example, is totally driven, again, not perfectly. Like there's this long chain of events that ended in radar. But the incentive to get that energy to push it over to the state was London's being bombed by the Germans. Right. So we need to be able to figure out some stuff. So that's one reason I'd give that devil its due. I lost my point on the second one.
Let's talk about trains on the moon.
Yeah, so what you referenced was a TikTok video that we we looked at before. We went
hide your
live.
kids, hide your wife.
NSFW.
It's pretty explicit.
warning.
And we can't bleep this technically. We don't have that kind of technology. So
Oh man,
sorry, YouTube.
subscribe
Earmuffs.
so they can get that technology.
earmuffs.
For anyone not paying attention, the United States just secured funding to give taxpayer money to Northrop Grumman to put a fucking train on the fucking moon! You don't have health care because we need fucking moon trains! This country is a fucking show! Remember that when you fucking vote that you don't have health care because the goddamn moon needs a fucking train!
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like how it is DARPA and it is Northrop Grumman. Just like I said, they're riding that wave of the past, right? Like a lot of people do, right? Like this happened great in the past, so we're going to keep saying this
Hey,
little...
don't you like high C? Don't you want the next high C?
Don't
We're
you
going
want
to
the
put a
next high
train
C?
on the moon. That's
Wait.
how we get the next high C.
Wait, wasn't it Tang?
Or Tang? I don't remember. It's like squeezing it out of the bottle. That was like what they
Tang was like the space drink.
space drink. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you
it's Tang.
contrast that with somebody like SpaceX. Like SpaceX gets tons of government contracts. That's not fake.
Well,
Like, they
which
get tons of government.
created material sciences that are completely novel and new. That's created rockets that were reusable, something that NASA had never had an incentive to do. Because why would you? Because you could just ask for a bigger budget. Like all kinds of reasons which private space travel has advantages, specifically because it can't collectivize its losses.
But I mean, to bring it more like the second point I was gonna make is like Peter Thiel. Like I just listened to his book 0 to 1 on some audio podcast.
It's a good one.
Right? Like in the tinkerer aspect of things, like there's a lot of that. And so what he complains about is like now all these corporations are very like they're like quarter to quarter bonus kind of stuff. Nobody does anything great anymore. They're all like this, like, how do I get to the next level? How do I like get my bonus? How do I do my stock? How do I do the DEI thing the right way so I don't get, whatever, right?
Yep.
Some version of that versus, doing the 0 to 1 move, which is hard, but that sometimes one doesn't work out, right? The story of the entrepreneur, but also like, that's where you see that great technology. But given like so much, I think a lot of it is instability. I don't know. People don't know where to put their money where it won't evaporate.
Well, and
right
this,
now.
the legal risk, right? Litigiousness nature of our current situation. It's the regulatory risk. I mean, there are so many lines of federal code we don't even know how many there are. Right? If you ask the Government Accountability Office how many lines there are, they say, well, we know how many pages there are roughly.
Yeah.
Like, think about that for a minute and then say, how do we have a risk tolerant society when you have a government that can write a new code, not tell you about it, and then put you in jail for violating it?
Yeah.
Without a vote of Congress. Right. And then you're like, where did all the technology go? Well, of course. Well, you killed it. You killed it with the EPA. You killed it with these agencies that have no check and have absolute power to incarcerate you or put you into bankruptcy for violating it.
The not knowing where to put your money thing is also a very real thing, because a lot of people, they're not like actively understanding the things that they're necessarily investing in. A lot of them are just following the incentives that are put in front of them. So when you have these like social credit systems like ESGs or DEIs and things like that, people are just like, well, I'm just going to follow the incentives in front of me.
There's also an over-financialization question there, right? So a lot of the super loose capital or super loose loaning, what am I looking for? Low interest rates create very speculative markets, which are more likely to just follow trends rather than look for the long-term play that's going to be systematic and have like core advantages, which you do see. High interest rate societies typically invest in longer-term projects because that's what the purpose of interest rates are, is to signal that there are savings that people are delaying consumption to then consume later. So therefore, you should consume longer-term projects that have more core research. I mean, if you could say, hey, having low interest rates for 70 years is one of the reasons why no one. Having low interest rates for 70 years is one of the reasons why no one does anything big or original anymore.
Say the word Fed.
But
Federal
Reserve.
When you say that, are you talking about with non-sound money?
So
interest rates low, or are you talking I want low? Because I actually don't like usury as a function. I think it compounds over generations into terribleness. I think that's terrible.
So the question is, how do you decide? Where does interest rates? What is a function of interest rates, and where do they come from? Right. So in a market economy, interest rates are a signal for the consumer preferences of consumers over time. Right. So it says that if interest rates are low, that means that that consumers want to consume right now. If they're high, consumers want to wait. If interest rates are high,
explain why that is.
Right. So interest rates, what they do is they signal how much loanable funds there are in the savings market. So with our current situation in fiat currency, there is no loanable savings market. You can just print money out of thin air. So it's infinite money printing and pyramids of debt. Right. It doesn't have to be that way. In fact, it's only enabled that way because we have the infinite printing money machine. Right? If you had a market-based economy on sound money, then you would have a situation in which you will interest rates fluctuate as the price of wheat fluctuates or the price of other things fluctuate on the market. So a bank says, I will give you a loan of this percentage because I assess your project being this with this much savings in a bank that I can actually afford. What they do right now is they say, here's all the money you want for the interest rates that's fixed artificially by the Fed. Does that make sense? So it isn't that high interest rates are good. It's just that it signals actual available resources in the economy to do the thing you want to do. And so if interest rates are high, it signals there's a lot of money there for the economy to loan out for projects to go a long time.
Kyle's going to like this. So my I feel like that's a very good left brain way to say it. Like, this should work out, except for people suck sometimes, right? So like the ability for people to take advantage of people, that's what my right brain says. Like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, that sounds good. Like, it should work out.
Low interest rates are predatory too.
No, I get that everything can be predatory. That's what I'm saying. Like, things can be predatory. So like saying that this signal is going to be pure and it's I think that's the issue. So when I have a society that says, listen, I don't like a high interest rate. Like, for example, I think this is not perfect because they were terrible in a lot of ways. But some of the institutionalized Byzantine Empire would say, you know, this person only makes this much money. You can't loan him money for more than this rate. Like, that's not allowed, or we'll say something like that.
Sure.
Or, and so somebody's rich who can do something risky.
Right.
Like, you can suffer this.
Right.
Or the real, like usury gets tricky because some people really want to just hardline it. Like, they're like, this is usury and this is not. This is English, so we love to like, this is the one thing.
Can you define usury?
So usury is so this is what I'm about to do. So a lot of people have different definitions where we can talk about the meaning crisis if we want. But what I would, as I understand it, or at least I've been regurgitating what's been taught to me, is it's basically lending people more money than it costs you to do that.
Let's go with this interest right
It's
here.
unethical practice of originating a loan with unreasonable high interest rate.
Yeah. So unreasonably being like, it doesn't really cost me this interest, but I'm going to loan it. Like outside of every base in this country, this is happening in stark detail with, you know, payday loans and all this kind of stuff they do. Soldiers, like soldier gets back, he's got a little money, right? Let me get this 30% loan on you. Like, it doesn't actually cost the owner of that payday loan, in my opinion, 30% worth of pain to do that. Now, in a system like ours, we have all kinds of convoluted things, and like we don't have a sound system where you could track things, maybe. But I think as far as the spiritual end of things, it's loaning higher interest than you need to do.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things that I think is important is to say that the marketplace and market signals don't require people to be perfect. What it requires people, and it does require people to have a set of virtues and values that are in common, right? So if everyone lies all the time, your society breaks apart, right? So generally telling the truth and generally doing what you say you're going to do holds society together. Like that's fundamental to the idea of markets. So it does require contracts to actually work, right? So if you sign a contract, you can't arbitrarily change your contract, and then because you know the king, you don't get in trouble for that. Does that make sense? So equal rights. All of those principles have to line up before you can even have a marketplace, right? We had those values that evolved over millennia due to very specific circumstances in Europe that created the Western canon, right? The Western world that allowed for capitalism to be what it was. The English, the Dutch, all that kind of stuff.
I consider the Western world much like wokeism, something we had to go through that I don't love.
well, we can talk about that. But
I'm kind of on board with that.
we can talk about
kind
that.
of on board with that.
But my point being is that
Westernism.
you're saying,
Oh,
okay,
hopefully we're
but
peak
people have
Westernism,
but
Kyle.
you're saying, but people have to be virtuous, and I'm saying, yes, I agree. People have to be virtuous in very certain ways, but one of the problems is that a lot of people will look from the outside and say, hey, that's too high of an interest rate, or hey, that's something else, and I can judge that without being a member of that, taking away the individuality and the sovereignty of that person who accepts that loan. Now, let me explain. Payday loans are a great example. You'll have very high interest rates. They seem completely unreasonable, but the time on the repayment of that loan is very short. So when you ban those payday loans, the social effects probably are, because we have a lot of natural experimentation with this, because a lot of localities were the first ones to ban payday loans. And so you would have one locality, very demographically similar to another locality, one banned, one did not. What happened was payday loans went from a legal business to an illegal business because people still needed liquidity in the short run, especially poor people. And so they got involved with mafia and mobs and gangs rather than legal businesses, which at the worst were things like garnishing wages and stuff like that, not breaking your legs. So if the net consequence of the policy was from an outside observer saying, I'm going to do something really great for poor people, I'm going to ban payday loans, and then they get their legs broken, that's a bad thing for them, right? So my point being, my point is not to actually disagree with you in the absolute sense. It's only that the signal, interrupting the signal has bigger consequences. And I think that consequence actually goes way deeper in our psychology than just boom and bust cycles and even sciences. It's like, I am not going to value kids in marriage because we've had low interest rates for 100 years. Right, that I think it goes that deep. Like people are
I think you're right.
Orientation to life has changed.
I think you're
because
absolutely
everything is now pleasure now, and that you could blame capitalism for that. I blame the Fed. I think that's a much better explanation because capitalism itself actually, without the Fed, incentivizes the long term.
That sounds pretty left brain to me, Carl. What do you think?
I completely agree with you on that, David. I do.
Well,
Because
I think there's a thing of like, which came first, like the social problem or the Fed? Like, I think that.
Sorry.
tighten that down.
I think what you're kind of getting at is that there's much like it's actually like which is the progenitor of the problem in a sense. Like, is the Fed a system of the social structure that we have now, or has the Fed developed the social structure that you're complaining of? Yeah. Like, I think there's a question there.
I don't know. The origins of the Fed definitely suggest it was imposed from above.
Completely.
It wasn't like we were like, we really need a central core bank
Well,
of
that's
cartels.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's not what he's saying,
Whether it was emergent or proposed from above or whatever. I know you love the word emergent. Like whether this type of stuff happened.
Right.
Like, that's not actually what I'm saying. It's just like you're I think what you're getting at is that there's these deep human nature social problems that are like a much bigger picture, and the Fed is like a variable that exists inside of that, rather than like the Fed causing those deep social problems. Something like that.
That might be fair.
It's not. Yeah, I mean, I would say like, is the Fed like a Fed's a consequence of the kind of, I guess you'd say, Western ideals is not with the Fed. I would say maybe it's a consequence of it in the sense of like we strip down. So this is what I would say. right? So we've separated everything around. Like let me pull apart my morals. Let me pull apart all these things from reality. Let me put it in this box, right? So let me mechanicalize a lot of things. And so the Fed is a great way to mechanicalize the economy, and that's what Keynesianism is. Let me math this out.
Yep.
Where
The economy is not organic. It's a machine. It's a robot. I can dial and twist knobs on. That's what you're not saying is actually Western. It's progressivism, right? It's a particular.
well, those are one and the same to me.
No,
because
they're
they're part of each
No,
other.
they're not. No. You have the Western tradition of which you take a certain set of values and you say these are the only values in the Western tradition now, right? So the Western tradition, for example, has a set of values, right? Courage, prudence, faith, hope, integrity, things like that, right? A whole set of values that evolve out of the Western tradition say this is what it means to be Dutch or to be an Englishman or to be these things. We all behave this way in bourgeois society, right? Of merchants and traders and things like that, right? Does that make sense? You follow me so far?
Yep.
So what progressivism does, it says, no, the only thing that matters is prudence.
So
The only thing that matters is how we plan the future through the smartest people being in charge, and that is the problem. I'm actually agreeing with you on this. It's their lack of ability to see the other parts of that.
I was worried about our intellectual jits right here. So this is what I would say.
Guys, I just want to interrupt here and say this is exactly what you'll experience if you join our Discord. So jump in.
What I would ask, I mean, this is much easier in person.
It's so much faster. I don't have to write it out.
Yeah, and if you
He's
can't keep
angry.
up with it, don't worry, you're not alone.
So you say Dutch, like when you say Dutch, do you mean the country? Like, so part of the Western thought is what is a nation state? Like that is a Enlightenment kind of thing, right? Instead of like a people. Like those are like, I hope people understand what I mean. The political entity, again, we've separated these from each other. Like here's some people, here's the political entity, the boundary. And these are now two different things in Western society. Let me continue to separate things down into little boxes.
Sure.
And what Dawkins was getting at, in my opinion, is he's not wrong when you get everything separated. Well, here's my moralization box, and here's like you can strip that out. But what I would challenge Dawkins to say is like, listen, reality is actually not separate. It's integrated. And what I mean by that is when you put it all together, like he's like, belief doesn't really matter. Like bullshit, yes, it does. You act on your beliefs. That's a fact. Like there's no other way you act. Like you act in accordance with what you believe and who you are and what your mindset is. Like those are all intertwined. As I've said before on the Discord, everyone, like if you put somebody in a brain scanner and I ask you to talk about your religion, your politics, and social or economic, like those are all the same neurons popping.
Sure.
Like these are all materially the same. Since Dawkins is a materialist, that's how I'm gonna attack him. Like these are reality, right? And so when you disentangle these things, and you pretend that you can then, how do I want to say it poorly? Like you separate everything down to, and again, you get very, very quantum level.
Right.
It's all from that lens where there's probabilities and whatnot. And then I'm going to look up, I can draw whatever line I want, right? And that would be my argument against like Western society and Protestantism, which is exactly what that is. And I'm not the one to make that argument. You can read Tom Holland to make that argument, and he makes it very well. But that's what I see Western society being. So when I see people like Dawkins and say, oh, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God. Like, well, you have, what do I want to say? You still are being religious because you have, like, people in our modern times, like we've changed words a lot and things change around. We don't have to get into that. But what love was considered in the ancient world, I can say in this way, like it's your give a shit matrix, right? It's what you care about. Like why you guys are doing this podcast, for example. Like there's something you care about. You care about your culture. You care about your society. You want it to be better. Like that is this love structure that binds us all in this way, right? And we can fight about community.
That was the most
today.
hippie thing you've ever said
I know.
in my presence.
Dude,
I loved it though.
Right.
So when he said, what is the Dutch? All I'm saying is that the economic history is pretty clear that as far as the formation of collectively owned capital structures, contract, how to like build out a various different set of laws that basically enabled free markets and capitalism started in the Netherlands, started with the Dutch, and then moved to England, and then grew all over the world. So that's just all I'm saying is that's how the economic history played out.
I think something that Adam's getting at is there's this German word. It's in German philosophy, and I'm spacing on what it's called.
Gestalt.
I can't remember what it's called.
Just start shouting every German word.
Yeah, no,
you know.
yeah.
Right.
No,
Rammstein.
Maybe not all of them.
I'm
Rammstein.
out of words.
no, but basically what it means is it's popular in a lot of German philosophers would use it. It's the distinction between individual, people, and nation. Which is kind of exactly what you laid out, where it's like, yeah, you can kind of separate them, but like there's also like kind of a collective aspect that exists there, and you gotta
In Zeitgeist?
Gestalt.
no, it's
I
not
was
Zeitgeist.
the Gestalt's, I think the gist, but I was
Yeah.
going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Alexander Dugin writes about in his book. He's like the political scientist around Putin, where he's talking about his fourth political ideology. He talks about this of like trying to take where the three major political factions of the world in the last 100 years, they kind of all tried to embody like a separate one of those, but like he's like in Great Russia of what we want to create, we need to try to combine those three things together and dispense with the negatives and put in the positives. But it's something like that. And I'm trying to think
A
of what
fourth
that
way,
is.
if you will.
Sam might know
fourth
it.
way.
Sam might know it. Check the chat. I think Sam
What is he
suggested
saying?
one.
What did he say?
I don't know how to say.
He's just
He
being
says
a-
Skriebelkuchen. Did I just say a slur, Sam? I don't know if you didn't.
We just offended
Kyle, would it be-
all the German viewers.
This is our first time doing a live in a long time. Would it be possible to detach the chat so it kind of comes up on the screen on the right
Yeah,
side?
we can't see what's going on.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he's just
We're at a
just
disadvantage.
He says Krakenwagen.
Krakenwagen.
Just
I
making
was
fun of the
cranking
Germans. Hannah's so upset right now. She's like, you guys don't like Barbie and you're doing all the German wrong.
I actually was on Hannah's side for most of this. I just don't even know what the argument's about.
I don't know what you're saying, Hannah, but I agree.
I remember it being there's an ideal Barbie, and then if you divert yourself from that ideal, maybe
Fact.
untrained people like ourselves can't see that, but somebody like Hannah who's like part of
a
her
Barbie specialist.
I mean, she's a part of her community. So
Yeah.
I'm of the subscriber. Your identity is actually defined by your community a lot more than individual. I know.
There you go.
Ready to fight on that.
She likes
But-
it. She likes it.
Does she? Good. Because that's what I see. Like,
Yeah.
she knows what the ideal Barbie is based off of the culture she's been around. And us idiots over here, I don't know what the hell a real Barbie is. So when they screw it up, she knows and I don't, right?
Well, I'm glad Sam did not have me say a slur. I just said crumble cake. So-
Oh, Krankenwagen. That's just an ambulance.
no, it was the Skriebelkuchen.
Krankenwagen.
The Skriebelkuchen is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I think it's
No.
Schriebel. Schriebel? Cooking?
Okay.
Tell me if I'm right, Sam.
All right. What's our next question?
Let's move on. Is Andrew Huberman worse than Al Qaeda?
All right. I don't actually. I'm conflicted on Huberman, but continue.
Nailed it. Oh, you got to show the. You got to show the thing, Kyle. Did you see this,
Oh,
Adam?
So I am not familiar with this story. I'm familiar with who Huberman is, and I'm interested to see what you guys think. Because when you're in, like, here's the dirty secret. It's not that dirty, but it's just a fact. Like, if you ask a person in the field of somebody who's popular, they have to hate them. Like, yeah, no, he
That's the
sucks.
rule.
Like, oh, he's a piece of garbage. Like, why? Because he's a piece of shit. I don't know.
Pop
Is that how you felt
scientist.
about Jordan Peterson as in the psychology
He's not
realm?
in my, like, I just think psychology's trash in general. So, like, no, that's not very fair. So I want to clarify.
He knows his neuroscience. Okay.
I want to clarify. The only thing more trash than neuroscience is psychology. That's what I want to say.
Okay.
I'm like, that's what I would
Shots
say.
fired. Pew,
So,
pew, pew, pew.
oh no, like I said, self-deprecating.
Well, so to get you up to speed,
Okay, hit me with it.
Huberman, there was a hit piece on him from the New Yorker that came out that was
New York Magazine.
or New York Magazine, sorry. That came out that was basically like we went and interviewed all of his girlfriends. He has a girlfriend. He's cheating on his girlfriend with like 6 other girls. He's basically a polygamist kind of a thing. And they're like, what do you think about that, public? You know, it was one of those things, right?
And everyone was like,
It's all about round-the-clock sex. It's all. Come
Yeah.
on, man.
That's a good. So
And now and he has just brushed it off, and there's like a bunch of shirtless photos of him on the internet that have gone
he's
up,
Chad,
and he's
though.
like he's more popular than ever, I think, probably
Yeah.
coming out of this.
Streisand effect. But what I would ask is, so do you guys remember? He was a part of the dork web. He was a psychologist guy. He was
Brett
really
Weinstein?
into polyamory. No.
No, I know who you're talking about. I know who you're
I
talking
answered
about.
before I got all the details.
"You're talking about Destiny."
No, what is his name?
I
I
forget.
know exactly who you're talking about.
It's not. It's like Geoffrey something.
Yeah,
I thought,
Joffrey is the first name.
right? Johnson.
What?
So this dude.
Perfect.
I
Yeah,
fucked
you
it
could
up.
probably be able to look it up.
Joffrey Miller.
I just like
Joffrey
listening
Miller,
to it.
yes. So he was a part of the dork web with the rest of them back in the day, or
What's
whatever.
the dork web?
The dark web.
The dark web.
The dark.
Oh.
The intellectual dark web.
God, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, like when they
With
were
Sam
all-
Harris, Ben
they were
Shapiro,
like-
You're
Jordan
like
Peterson.
they're a bunch of nerds.
They were like the Avengers, like before COVID, and we're like, yeah, we don't need you. Like, you guys actually gonna do something? Just talk.
We're fighting
You know
the wokes.
Fighting the wokes.
That's it.
So Geoffrey West is like so that's the
Miller.
psychology version
Miller.
of or Mark. Sorry, I want to go West. It seems like this is psychology version of this, but when I complain about psychology and neuroscience together, like really they should be together.
I agree.
Like this is the Gnosticism that is Western culture, where we have this dualism where you get trapped in Plato brain where the body's the prison house of the soul. That is a deep level that we do not need to unpack. But like the issue that I have is you have this immaterial, and people are separating these things when they're intricately related, right? So when you hear about psychology principles and you're not talking about neuroscience, you're kind of off in this space. And when you're talking just about the neuroscience and not getting into the psychology element that is from those, this is where you both go awry.
I feel like
This is
Huberman and Peterson would agree with you on that so far.
They
So
probably
what
would.
is your disagreement,
Dude,
with him?
and their podcasts together have been some of my favorites. Like, 'cause they just riff.
I was just commenting on his sex life right now, and that's why I don't know. you
well,
can go-
well,
How
and-
dare he? He's single.
That's why I
and
think
he
you
has
should get with that
girlfriends.
Miller dude, and they could talk about it. Like, I don't know what's going on. Maybe he is a polyamorous guy. He's like, yeah, I listened to Geoffrey when he was in the door.
Well, because this is actually, Nietzsche boy, right? Going to Nietzsche. In his book Beyond Good and Evil, he actually says exactly that, where he says psychology is the queen of the sciences, but what the problem is that all of these things are not actually speaking to one another, and we have like disintegrated and compartmentalized all these things, and they should be combined together to actually get real truths in the world.
There's
and
no
stuff like that,
integration
right?
across these
Yeah.
things, and that's why multidisciplinary research is like supposed to be like the best kind of research right now, right? Like that's why it's so trendy.
Well, you have to. That's actually what you have to do to get funded. But in the military, they have the same version of this problem. They in that way they call it silos of excellence. Oh, my military folks must have heard that by now. Like, oh my god, exactly. So silos, same thing where you're just in your own. I mean. When you think about what traditions are, like the sciences are this new tradition that's being passed down. Like when I did my neuroscience degree or whatever, like I did my PhD on attention and neuroscience, like the neuroscience of attention and vision. But if I wanted to read the literature, people are like, oh, let's read the literature. I would need to read like 1,500 papers. Well, I did the math on that, how long that would take, let alone me digesting what they said. So like there's just so much stuff. Like you're really in this apprentice model the whole way through. And so that gives you a certain way to think about things. And so we like to talk like we're all like on the same page. This is what I talked about. Like you get the public intellectual out there.
The
like,
consensus
fuck
of
this.
science,
Yeah,
right?
Screw this guy. Yeah, consensus.
Yeah, right.
Right. Again, I mean, COVID flipped everything upside down.
Right.
Like we all know that, or hopefully
Right.
we do.
If you listen to this podcast.
But
you
like
do.
Huberman, like the issue, like if you want me to complain about Huberman and anybody who's in that realm where you start it, like he's a molecular guy, which is fine. I mean, I'm doing quantum stuff right now, so I get but when you jump these scales and you're not really like, what do I want to say? Like people got to make money, people got to write papers, people got to get dissertations. So you have to tell a story.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the story is at some point the complexity at level A, right, doesn't quite track. When we say that's why I hate the word emergent, because it's emerging to the next scale. We don't know what happens in this black box.
Yeah.
But then we can talk about things in this way, right? And so this is like.
This is why Weinstein hates string theory for the same reason, right? It's
Is
just not
that what it is?
connected. Yeah, because string theory just doesn't connect to anything we can actually experiment with or really
and
get anything out
all
of.
funding in physics is going towards this, and
String
it hasn't
theory,
really
string theory.
produced anything
for like 40
real,
years
60
or something.
years, I
Yes,
think
it's
is what
crazy.
his complaint is. But there's also just like there's these like patron saints in the field, and if you say anything, it's like you get brought down by the committee and
Sure,
like,
sure.
all this stuff, right? Like
There's a lame. I mean, I'll phrase it differently in a second, but like my advisor always would say, like, well, science progresses one funeral at a time.
You know that's from Robert Polanyi.
Right.
And he wrote a book basically saying that science doesn't operate the way science should. Science should operate that we test hypotheses and be like, oh, I was
Sure.
wrong, and then I release all my data, and everyone goes like, oh, I had the same hypothesis, I was wrong, and like
no, now
what
it's,
it
now,
happens
now
is,
we tribe up.
Yeah, you have like ancestry, and then like you trace ancestries as they come along. And
There's
you're like, I'm
actually,
actually from this school and this tradition.
There's a whole like they call it neurotree. There's
Which
like a
can be a
whole
good thing, to be clear.
about this. I'm on the neurotree, by the way. Of like, there's like a website about where you can see where you, like this person did this. Like I'm under Jack Gallant and under this. I don't know if you can research this.
Well,
Please.
No,
you could
yeah,
you could do the same thing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Like it's
Yeah.
all these traditions
Well,
that's
what it is.
specifically
It's-
laid out. Yeah.
It's an apprentice model kind of way.
But it's also like a philosophical thing. It's like people tend to pick a great example. Another one, Austrian economics. It comes out of mainline economics to do a very similar phenomena when economics, according to the Austrians, goes off rails to maintain the original spirit of it.
Yeah.
Right.
This is by
Classic.
far the nerdiest podcast episode we've ever done.
Is it?
Oh yeah.
That's what happens when we get off the rails. We
Thank
we
you,
get
Bennett.
nerdy.
We divert to the nerd mean.
Well, we were talking about the science land, right? But like, if you don't like the way science is going, just wait 30 years because it will change, and that's part of it. And so, why I loved the post that Kyle just made not that long ago on the Discord. For all you, if you're on the chat and don't know, if you're watching this live and on Discord, I don't know who you are.
That's right.
How is that happening?
You're
How
a
is that
fed.
happening? How's that? But what I like about what when like McGilchrist or whatever his name is
Ian
is talking
McGilchrist.
about
Great book, Master and His Emissary. Great.
yeah,
book.
Master and Emissary. So like the science, if you will, is coming around to what the ancients thought a lot. Whenever I see that kind of happening, which you can like see that pattern match up, I love those things because that is just again like the whole left brain, right brain. To me, I will get in trouble for this, but like in a lot of ways, it's like that noetic faculty versus your rational faculty. So that split between the two. And so when you're talking about a noetic faculty, like if you go to Genesis and go to Orthodox tradition, a lot of other traditions in the Christians and Judaism too. I don't know about Islam, but let's put a pin in it. But the noetic faculty gets blinded during the fall. And so now this is where you see people going off. I mean, that part of what eating from the tree of good and bad is you thinking you have the ability to discern good and evil yourself without any input at all. Like you have this sense of self. That's one way to look at it. There's a lot of ways to look at it. But that is one pattern, right? I have this ability to discern good, right? I am like basically God level, right? I don't really listen to anybody else. So inside the person, this left and right brain kind of, again, like I heard this today and I posted it. You should listen to it. It's good. But like the what they complain about, I actually agree. Like even to call it left brain, right brain is a very left brain way to say it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's like an
So, like, that's why-
it's like an over categorical
Exactly.
way of actually looking at what
Right.
it is.
I'm trying to rationalize
but
what's going on
it's
here.
useful for us to be able to.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about. Jordan Peterson had an interview with Ian McGilchrist, and he's kind of like become like the leading guy on hemispheric brain stuff, of putting the differences between left brain, right brain, and one of the problems that this kind of area of psychology and neuroscience has had is that it became very like pop culturized, where you have kind of like, it's like, oh, this is the logic brain and this is the art brain. And that's not actually what it is at all. It's actually much more like, this is the side of the brain that sees the tree, and this is the side of the brain that sees the forest. This is the devil and the angel on your shoulder, like on like a meme kind of landscape too, where you kind of have like the one that sees the whole picture, and then the one's like that doesn't even believe that one exists and is like poking at you and trying to be like super sciencey and logic and compartmentalizing everything to kind of miss the whole substance of it. It's very interesting, like kind of concept, I think, to view humans.
It's kind of like a lot of the research that they draw on, and it's actually good stuff. I was actually talking to my classmates about this today, is like they, especially in this like clinical research sector, you have things like split brain patients where somebody has like epilepsy really bad, and they'll cut the corpus callosum, which is that bundle of white fibers that connect the hemispheres, if you will. And so, you know, I'm not that great to speak on all the crazy things that happen, but essentially the gist of it is, using my right brain, if you will, like the gist of it is your right and your left brain will answer problems differently, you know? So there's that part of it. The other thing that I think is fascinating with it is that, you know, you're right. So there's a book by Daniel Kahneman. They actually won the Nobel Prize in economics, which we all know means nothing in today's world. But I mean, they were really at the thinking fast, thinking slow kind of model of things. And so they were characterized at their own way, but you have this faster thinking way, your intuition, if you will. And then you have this rational faculty, right? And so then the characterization I was hearing it today, I mean, there's a reason you have both. Let's put it that way. Like they're supposed to be aligned in ways. And so I liked it. I don't know if I would agree 100% if I thought about it, but I haven't. So we'll just say it. Like the right brain gets the initial intuition, kicks it to the left brain to rationalize a little while, and then brings it back into a big picture kind of way.
Right.
Like think of it like that. But another thing that's fascinating with the left brain, that's where your language center is located. And so what I don't know, and a lot of neuroscience is like, oh, you know, we don't really know. But so what I do know is true is it's really your non-dominant side. So your left brain and your dominant hand side, because the left side controls the right side in the motor cortex. That's really what they're talking about, your non-dominant side. Like that seems to be tracking with this left brain, right brain. So I know you lefties out there, you might be, it's okay to be left brain if you want to think about it like that.
Wait a minute.
Does
So
that
the
scare you?
left hemisphere controls the right side of
Yeah,
your body,
that's correct.
and vice versa.
That's correct.
So if you're a lefty, doesn't that mean your dominant side is your right brain? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, so it's okay for them to be left brain because in their world, being right brained in the right world, like we say right brain, like oh you're artistic or whatever.
Yeah.
Like in their world, it's flipped. Because I'm just saying that seems to be the case.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So like when you're non, like if you think about it, like the left brain phenomenon, since we're going to stay in left brain language, is details, rationalization of details. So all this fine motor movement I can do, or any kind of stuff like that, this whole logic framework I can put, like that tracks to me. Like I can use my right hand, my dominant hand, a lot more finer than I can use my left hand. You know, ambidextrous. I don't know what's going on there. I mean, everybody's different, right? But I mean, you
He's
get
a drummer,
what I mean,
so makes sense.
right?
What?
You're a switch
Drumming?
hitter.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe's a switch hitter.
I mean,
No,
all three
no.
of us have drumming.
No, there's still directionality to drumming. Right.
Right. I would assume that there's a dominant side, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I mean by like, you know, we say the right, left brain. Like there was even jokes, if I remember right, in grad school, they were like, oh, people used to think this is how this works. Oh, and they said the same thing about learning styles. I mean, both on if I said it the right brain way, I would say both are true. There is a right brain, a left brain, and there are learning styles. Like I just will attend better to audio versus visual and audio. Like when I listen to your guys' podcast, I won't watch YouTube. I'll listen to it on audio. There's a lot of reasons why. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of videos like that. Right. I like to watch stories usually in video format. I don't like to listen to them. So I don't really listen to a lot of fictional audiobooks. I'm not very good at attending to those. I might have to read those or I might have to watch them on TV. But you guys or any other kind of audio like information I like to get in the audio sphere, and that the people will be like, oh, that's a bunch of garbage. Like that can't be right. But again, like what we know about all that is pretty limited anyway. So
My experience was when I was an art student for a very brief part of time was I read a book called
What art?
Drawing.
I just want to know. Sorry.
I did illustration. Yeah. Was
Show
drawing
us
with
some
the
of your
right.
work.
It's a very long time ago. This was
Portfolio.
This was
You need to bring it in.
20 years ago. More
Did
than
he
20
do
years
this
ago.
logo?
No, he
I'm
did.
just kidding.
He's the
he's the
designer.
designer.
He's actually good at it. I was never good at it. So, anyways,
my left brain side.
was drawing with the right side of your brain, right? The creative and basically what it is like what that book described was, have you ever been drawing and lost track of time?
Oh, for sure.
In that sense of losing track of time in zone was that a different side of the brain than what you usually operate in. And when you're doing that, that's kind of the feel to it. And once it was operationalized like that, I got to the point where I could switch into it. Like I could very quickly do that.
Flow state.
Flow state.
Basketball
Yeah,
is similar.
one way to
Flow
think of
state,
it would be
flow
like
state.
left brain is much more ego based, while right brain might be more flow state.
Yeah,
Right.
and that to me, once it was operationalized into a feeling that I could relate to, that I had been into, I could then practice to get to there really quickly, and then so I could snap into that in basketball or drawing or all kinds of things.
I definitely recommend Ian McGilchrist's book, The Master and His Emissary, because the first half of it is him going over like the actual kind of science around the hemispheric brain ideas, but then the second half is actually applying it to society and like in history and looking at when society was way more kind of in these left brain functions versus when it was in the right brain functions. And he kind of puts in a lot of a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now, especially with like wokeism and things like that, is because it's like over categorization of everything and kind of where science is now. It's very much just like everybody's trying to like categorize all like, oh, gay, lesbian, trans, you know, like that's just like an easy example of it. But
Right.
it happens everywhere. It's not just that area. It's like every aspect of society is very much those left brain functions, and people are kind of losing track of the wholeness of everything, right?
Sure.
Oh man, I have a confession. So like you posted that, and like I was like, I've heard this name. It's one of those books you buy, and you don't read.
Oh,
I don't
been
know what
there.
show.
Yep.
So it's not master. It's not whatever it's called. It was The Matter of Things, his new book, because it's first off, it comes in 2 books that are bigger than the Bible, both of them. There's crazy how much this.
I haven't
information's
read
in
the
it.
new one yet.
Yeah, no one will. You'll get it, and you'll put it on your thing. Like, you can't write these things
Too much.
anymore.
Too
Like,
much.
why would you write this? You know, like,
Just like a 30-hour audiobook.
yeah,
The Matter
no.
No problem.
That book, if you did the whole thing, like,
Yeah.
so 48 Laws of Power is like 40 or like 36 hours
Yeah,
worth
yeah,
of audiobook. It is a good audiobook. That's a
Yeah,
good one to do on audiobook. But like, that's this thick or whatever. Like, he's got 2 of them. So it's like 90 hours worth of.
It's a lot of value
Who
right
knows
there.
what- That must be why, because I actually went, after listening to that podcast, I went on Audible and tried to get it, and there was no audiobook for it. So that must be why they haven't actually.
People
he-
die
he
on their
hasn't-
way to
He hasn't
reading
read it enough. Yeah,
can't make it.
He hasn't gotten all the way through yet.
Yeah, they don't
All right,
make it
next
all
question. We've got dived
I
very far
was gonna
into
say,
neuroscience.
next person who
Oh,
says
geez.
left or right brain, I get to punch in the face.
It's a very
yourself.
important to me. It's a very important concept of like once you kind of look that and adopt it as a framework, you see it everywhere in people, like in the way that people talk about things, the way people view them. You see it in their worldview. You're like, oh,
Wait,
this is what's going on.
What do you see, Kyle?
Yeah, what do you mean?
I see it all the time.
What is it?
I say it on I say it on the podcast all the
What
time.
is
We're getting
it?
too left-brained about this. I say it all the time.
Here
Oh,
he
he
comes.
said
Here he
it.
comes.
It's like that Super Trooper clip.
Here he comes.
You're just-
I was actually
I
just
wanna-
like,
I'm not
I
afraid of
swear to
you.
God, I'll pistol
I'm
whip the
putting a
next
pin
guy.
in it. I'm putting a pin in it for you. Like you can't just do a hard transition. You got to pivot. But the
Nice.
next thing I want to move on to is what the hell is going? Are we entering World War III because of biblical prophecy in Israel with these red heifers and things like that? What is going on right now?
I thought that was propaganda. The first time I saw it, I was like, that can't be real. And then I didn't follow up on it. Just didn't get around to it. But it looks legit.
So there was a series of videos that I found that I found somebody explain this because a lot of people I've had multiple people ask me to actually to explain what is going on right now.
Well,
And-
where the fuck are they? Why
They're
aren't they
asking
in the
you?
chat?
Yeah, like I've had multiple.
Well, we
like-
brought
like-
Adam on.
First off,
not a great source for this, but they've wanted us to cover it on
Sure,
the
sure.
podcast. But so there's a series of videos that I've that kind of went semi-viral talking about it and covering what's going on. So let's just take a little minute here to
This is a good one.
talk about
It's
this.
written for the temple to be rebuilt. That ushers in the end times. All the tools that they use within the temple need to be cleansed. In order to do that, they sacrifice a red heifer. There's only been 9 red heifers ever sacrificed. The last red heifer to have been sacrificed was 2,000 years ago. A cattle rancher in Texas got invited with these rabbis to go look for red heifer. They found 5. The process was insane. They can never have been yoked. No one could have leaned on them. That's why it's been 2,000 years. They determined we finally found them. These 5 heifers are in Israel right now being like protected and guarded. They have 9 months to sacrifice this red heifer because they can't be older than 3 years old. He's basically saying like if this happens, you know we're now in the trajectory of
The
this
end times.
end times prophecy stuff. What's crazy too, with each sacrifice, they always mix the ashes of the previous red heifers. When they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, they also found a jar that had the previous 9 red heifers'
Oh my
ashes
gosh.
in it. Weird. Dating back to Yo, this is
Back to Moses.
Back to Moses.
all right. First thing,
What are we thinking?
This is just a public service announcement. If you're listening to music in the background of video, it is guaranteed propaganda.
And hummus.
We do that all the time in our clips.
Good. That's also one way to make it go
Yeah,
viral.
but also shorts on every platform. They basically like throw some music on there.
Yeah.
Straight hypnotism. I love it.
Yeah, dude.
All right, sorry.
You need it. No,
I
Continue.
was locked in on that.
Were you?
I was.
Yeah.
Hey, Bennett. Why don't our shorts look like that?
Yeah, dude. What's up?
Dude, I like these overlays. Like they've got some cool filters going
Pictures
on.
going on underneath it. It like zoomed in on his
He's like-
hand
he's
real
like
quick. It's like, oh
live
my
Yeah,
god.
I mean, if
chastising
you
you right
guys
now.
want
Can
to
you
start paying me to
Can-
do it,
That's
Can
what
you
we need
make me look-
members.
Can you make me look younger?
Where's my sponsorship money going if it's not going to Bennett? I'm just kidding.
Mostly sandwiches.
Mostly random.
Shout out to our official and unofficial sponsor, Fink
Right,
Deli.
But it is interesting because like it's one of these things where whether or not some of this stuff is true, like on the prophetic side,
Yeah.
people are actually acting on these things,
Right.
Like to a large degree, like people are like putting security around these cows, and you know,
As you watch this, keep in mind that one of the major reasons for the escalation into October 7th was a battle at the mosque that sits on the Temple Mount.
Oh.
So when you see this and how drastically, like, out of the blue, everyone's crazy, out of the blue, October 7th, that there was a definite lead up between the ultra-Orthodox and Muslims on, I forget the mosque's name that sits on the Temple
The
Mount.
mosque is on the Temple.
The Dome of the Rock.
Oscar Mosque?
Or, no,
Aqsa,
wait,
yeah.
Dome of the Rock is Mecca.
Yeah.
yeah.
but-
Sorry, that's Mecca.
But
Sorry.
still, you got the right idea. On that sits on the Temple Mount, where
holy place.
where the Jewish temple used to sit. So.
Well, and the idea is that all this is supposed to happen, cows are sacrificed, and then the third temple comes in. But and so something with this is Hamas, a spokesman of Hamas.
I'll comment later. Continue.
A spokesman of Hamas in January said that one of the major reasons for October 7th was because these cows were moved to Israel. They had a list of reasons, but this was one of the things that he said.
Was that said before it was public knowledge that they moved to Israel, or is that post hoc ergo propter hoc?
He said it in January. I don't know.
Because I didn't hear about it till February. So if he said it in January, very possible. I don't know. I'm very curious about that. That'd be interesting. Because if they knew that it was coming before the public did, that would be interesting. But the insider covered it, huh?
I mean, they believed it.
No,
That's what matters.
So it mattered.
Yeah, like
So
that's
they're-
right?
That obviously that's what matters. If you believe that one of your second most holy site was about to be demolished to then be put in by your oppressor's religion, you too might freak out and do something heinous.
Yeah. So here's another kind of comes from the same thing. It's just an
Same guy.
extension of that clip.
Who's this guy?
I don't know, but he went viral just like
Every
explaining it. I think people
story's got
really
a
liked.
storyteller. Who is
It's also
this
that.
son of a
It's also
bitch?
that edit, man. Look at those. Look at those
that
edits.
nose ring.
Fat Jesus.
Put some time in it.
I think
Oh,
whoever this is, whatever this podcast is, this was their viral moment. Was
Dude,
talking
look how big
about
his
this
head
thing.
is. Like, look at my thing. I am like full. Like, if he's got two on his head, that's a giant head. That's how smart he is.
Dude, so much brain. So much brain.
So much. I bet his right brain.
Both
That's
left,
right.
both
Bring it
left
on,
and
Oh
right.
my
But yeah,
He said it. He said the words.
But here we go. We'll continue on with this.
An
Enter.
update on the red heifer. They have built the altar on the Mount of Olives, and hummus. One of the major reasons that they attacked
Hummus.
Israel in October was because of
Some
the red
nice
heifers.
censoring.
Because the Dome of the Rock sits on the Temple Mount right now, and by doing this
Dome of the Rock.
sacrifice, of
I
the
was
red
right.
heifers,
Yeah,
it is
you corrected
an
yourself.
all-out
You
threat
watched
of
this
being like,
earlier.
we're going to get rid of the Dome of the Rock and rebuild the temple. The Muslims were just like, no way.
It's a whole different narrative. What are the potential implications of this being enacted?
The Dome of the Rock is completely sacred to the Muslim faith.
Yep.
And if that's destroyed, you will not only have every Muslim nation, you'll have every Muslim in the world. Well, it'll be like the Battle of Armageddon, which talks about all the nations rising up against Israel. It's crazy that they literally have a sacrifice altar built. And they said it'll
that's
happen
recently built?
By the time this comes out, they could have already done it because they said it'll happen any day between now and Passover, which is in the end of April. So I say all that just to be like, yo, just be ready for anything.
Ninjas
And
are butterflies.
I saw that. I saw that line go by. It's from Ephesians, is what I saw. That ninjas and butterflies from Ephesians.
That doesn't seem like an accurate transition.
I think they
The Bible talks about ninjas.
made it contemporary for a minute.
It's from the Message translation.
I think that's the podcast that it's from.
Yeah, right.
They were trying to get some Eastern influence on the biblical
Makes sense.
scripture.
Japan. You know.
Well, so what's what do you want to know? I don't know. I don't know much. What are you worried about?
What happens if
Like people are crazy.
if just
like
they're
people- a
walking
lot
the
of people are
cows up
talking about
and
it.
the cows get shot? Is it over? Like what?
Well,
You don't even need to shoot them. You just need to lean against them.
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm saying like if you wanted
So
to
it's
do it
now-
from a
How much do we get?
distance.
It's
They
now a
leaned on the
game.
cows.
It's now a game of capture the flag for the cows.
but
We just need to touch
You just
them.
gotta go up and just.
but going
Like,
on
oh,
with
we
this,
gotta
I mean, the
because-
environmentalists have been saying cows are destroying the planet.
Oh.
So
But and here's the thing too is it's not just like internet's conspiracy. Also, like mainstream press is talking about
Yeah.
this stuff, and they're all trying to correlate the cow stuff with scripture, with this eclipse that's supposed to be coming next week. And,
Yeah.
I know our boy Liam just sent me a whole thing about apparently there's like these locusts that are starting to spawn everywhere that haven't been around for 200
Yes.
years. It's
Yes,
like
and-
what is happening?
And CERN is going to fire up
And-
the
and
Large
CERN
Hadron
is-
Collider during the
And
eclipse.
CERN is trying to summon demons.
We're all fucked, you guys.
How are they summoning demons?
Y'all need Jesus.
CERN is trying to do this like interdimensional stuff with the Hadron Collider on the day of the eclipse.
Okay, so
how dare they?
Hannah thinks that everyone always thinks their times are the end times.
That's what I was going to say.
Is this Y2K?
So first, I will. Let me settle everyone down.
Everyone, chill out.
Give me a brown paper
First
bag.
thing I'll
I'm
say
freaking out, man.
First thing I'm going to say to my Jewish brethren is a lot of them like I'll help them. Like a lot of them think this is ridiculously nonsense. Like a lot of Orthodox Jews and people actually believe. Again, the material Jews or whatever who are atheists who don't believe in anything and they just happen to have a bloodline or whatever. I don't know how all that works for them. But
these Russian Jew Zionists.
These Russian Jew Zionist types. This is my country and I burn in the sun types. But like that's a different. I'm not talking about them, but I'm talking about like actual believers. Like a lot of people in the Orthodox Jewish faith or people that are actually serious about it, they think a lot of this is nonsense. Right, so I'll say that. The other part I'll say, the red heifer side on the Christian dispensationalist side, which happens to go all over the South.
Big words.
Big words. So what is a dispensationalist? I'm not a theological scholar to really put that line. I'm gonna do it poorly, but maybe Kyle can help me out. But people in Texas, right? People like in the South, these Baptist communities and on up, like these people, they believe that there is a special category for the Jews. And they are God's chosen people still. And so we need to help them accomplish their goals to usher in the end times, right? So I'm going to trick God. Now I'm going to real throw it down. So I can trick God by doing this. And so he'll do what I say, right? Like, so here's the thing I would say about it. This is really like, I'm going to shoot everyone in the face. Listen to this Western culture. Like if there's
figuratively,
if there's a power that God has to subject himself to, and that includes your punishment stuff, like then that power is God. Like how does that work to you? Like how is there a power where God is subjected to that is higher than God, and that's not God? Like, explain that to me again like I'm a retard. Like, I don't know what you mean.
Figuratively, everyone.
Hey, I am ready to be fired.
No, okay, so let me just steel man their case real quick.
I just want to say, like, he pretty much nailed it. Like, if I just look up the Wikipedia article on it, it's just like Christian Zionism, God's chosen people, Christian have a special, like,
there's actually a documentary being made right now. Lee Fang did a bunch of interviews with congressmen talking to them about why they support Israel, and a tremendous amount of the Republican congressmen who are critical in Israeli support, I'm good, are basically saying that because I believe that he's going to come again, and the Jews have to be there in order for him to come again.
He said the word.
I couldn't.
I lost it. Hey, Revelations does mention there being a third temple at the time, and it mentions that the Jews are around as a nation. Now, I'm only still manning it, and you can tell me why I'm wrong. If you believe in a literal interpretation of Revelations, then it makes sense to say, well, in 1940s, despite, the unlikeliness of it happening in many ways, the state of Israel is created. That seems like the fulfillment of prophecy. Now, if you could say, if the prophecy was, we're going to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem, and you were like, no one has to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem after the Babylonian, conquest or whatever, then therefore I'm not going to move any stones. They would say like, well, no, that's not how it is. You're instructed to build the walls around Jerusalem again. That's why we gave you the prophecy to do so. So like their interpretation of it is just that there is these conditions are in place at Revelations, and as those conditions happen, we can of course participate in that because we want Jesus to come again. Right, so they wouldn't see it as a trick or a force. They would see it as this is just participating in God's story.
Well, and this is the important thing too. Is like when I originally studied this history like a decade ago, this was what I came across too. Was like you had all these Jewish Zionist journalists that were writing about this stuff and basically about how they are going to be bringing about the forthcoming of the Messiah. And it wasn't just Jewish Zionists; it was also Christian Zionists. Like there was a commingling that happened there, which is like the dispensationalism thing.
What?
And where it was like we have to bring the Jews to like the Holy Land in order for the next stage to happen. And they were very openly talking about this, but it became this thing where I was like, okay, I studied this. This is kind of like how I learned it. And then whenever I heard people talking about the subject, like nobody talks about that aspect of it.
Right.
It's like this is like a major feature of what these people are trying to accomplish. So we're just kind of like leave that behind for some reason in public discourse.
It's very like Schofield Bible-y. Like there's somebody made this Bible, made a reference to again, you have, and this happens in a lot of study Bibles to anybody who is still a practicing member of any sect, is you'll have a Bible and then you'll have footnotes about the Bible, right? And so the Schofield Bible is basically that, only that they have this reference thing, like this is what this really means, right? And so when you start to do that, you can, again, you've broken everything apart, and most, if not all, I guess, of my Protestant friends are sola scriptura. So they really, like, the word is the word. Like, literally, word is the word, right? Like, this is what we have. And again, a lot of people in my sect will get criticized because we don't know that much scripture. We're like, yeah, like, I know the story. I don't know where it is. Like, I can't show you. Like, I'm not going to be like, that's Ephesians 6. So like, oh, it says this. Like, I'm not going to be that way because I don't know that. I'm not very good at that.
That's a left brain.
That's some left brain. Left brain is going to murder.
He's just tallying up.
But the point that Hannah was making, I think, is correct. Like, people have been pinning the tail on the Antichrist forever. Like Napoleon was the Antichrist, Hitler's the Antichrist, all these Antichrists throughout all this history. So, in how I was taught is, apocalypse really just means revelation. And so, one, the whole Bible is the apocalypse, like it's the entire Revelation. But the Revelation of St. John, like it is these patterns that, it's kind of like Genesis. Like it was true back then, it's true now, and it's going to be true in the future. Like, yes, there's going to be, if you're a Christian, you believe that there will be this end point, the end of time, if you will, right, where the temporal time might end, and you have the next age. Exactly. So, but when it comes to like
different story, though, just to be clear.
But
a lot of similarities.
Not in the Bible.
But in the ages, if you will, like the end times began after Christ's ascension. So we've been in the end times for a while, according to some tradition, right? At least my tradition. And so, like, when people are like, "Oh, we're in the end times," like, well, we've been in the end times. And so, but I will say this, and there's been plenty of talk, even in my tradition, where people, and again, like, it depends on who you ask. Like, one of them guy is a canonized saint in one of the churches, not the one I'm in, but he just says, like, it's later than you think. It's like kind of like that. Like, it's later than you think. Like, we're getting close to, like, obviously the patterns are picking up, and again, you look at how our culture is going. People can easily say, like, oh man, it looks like the demons are being released. It looks like all this stuff is happening. These guys are trying to do the red heifer. They're trying to build a third temple. But again, like that is a logical way to look at things.
So and to be clear, when you talk about like the Schofield Bible and kind of literalism as applied in like an interpretive layer, so a lot of Protestants will have, we believe the word's the word, and they're going to memorize it, all that kind of stuff. But then much of their the bird is the word.
I was thinking
the bird is the word.
The bird is the word. You know what I mean?
But the word is the word.
I wish you had that on the
Right.
soundboard.
It's the holy word.
I wrote it
God.
down.
Oh my
God, don't, please, God, do not. Please.
You could have
No.
nailed it right now.
That's
That
the
would've been
only one I'm vetoing. I'm vetoing that one.
Oh my goodness.
Bird,
All right.
bird,
Anyways,
bird.
my point my point is that much of what makes sense of the covenant system that most Baptists and evangelicals believe is an interpretive layer placed on top of the literal word, right? And that's where we get, and actually the Schofield Bible is a big reason for that interpretive layer being as popular it is as across Protestantism. Just trying to help unpack some of the
words?
language that you use that didn't define.
Yeah,
just
again,
for our listeners.
I'm not
you're
great
good.
at this. Like, scripture is central, but I don't like. I'm not going to be like. Again, I'm not very good at this. How I was taught.
You're doing great. Why you keep qualifying?
Because I'm not a bishop and
Stop apologizing.
I'm not a teacher. No, it's
Just
actually
tell us
like,
what you think.
Hey, the church might censor me. That's fine. But like, what I would say is like, listen, like I agree with the sentiment. Like, this is great. It's really great to like hold on to this written, like
gives
corpus.
you a firm sense of
It
grounding.
gives me something to look back to.
Right.
But there's a lot of issues with what goes on. Like, and we know this because of the last 5 years. Like, example, like words change. Right, and then that's true.
Racism.
Exactly, racism. vaccine. Like there's words that change. There's words that change. And so
It's forever mutating.
So you need a tradition.
It's a hate that mutates.
Right.
It's a hate that mutates.
So the fact that there's
Unique hate. Unique hate.
there's a tradition that helps you like, no, this is what they meant. Like example in the founding documents, like people are like of this judicial mind, like originalists or whatever, where they'll like tell you this is what they meant. So like think of that, only apply it to the scriptures in a sense, where you have that part of it too. So, you know, one thing about it is when you go to this level of this is it, right? This word is all I have. That's not very fair. That's not true. But like the word is where it's at. Like so you but without the tradition surrounding it, to me it's very similar to like bones in a body. Like the scriptures, the bones, you need them. That is central to who you are. It gives you your form. Right? This is where the form, but without the tradition to animate it, like it's not going to move. Like you're spiritually dead without it. That's what I would say about it. That's a shot across the bow, but it's not meant to be one. It's just it's just a way to think about how I think about it.
Sure.
Right?
All the Protestants like.
I mean, I was actually a Protestant, turned an atheist, and then came out of it. So I'm an atheist apostate.
What, Orthodox?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that what?
Yeah,
he's an Orthodox boy.
Which is, you know, there's some bad boys in Orthodoxy on the internet.
Well, the internet, it's
Ortho
strange
bros.
because the algorithm really wants me to be Orthodox. Like it's like giving me a lot.
You listen to a lot of like Jonathan Peugeot, right?
I've been praying for you.
That's what it is.
And the algorithm is picking it up.
I asked my wife. I was like, let's go to Orthodox church.
You should.
And
There's only
I'm like,
one.
You'll have to wear a hat, and she's like, you know.
She does not have to wear a hat.
Kidding,
These
I'm
are
kidding.
all voluntary.
Okay,
although I met a guy.
I love the
Go
idea
ahead.
that your prayers are enforcing the algorithm. I love that.
It's a very next level.
Dear Lord, make that weight matrix. So save it. Shows up on Sunday and Wednesday. Go down the journey with us.
And Wednesday.
We went to Easter Sunday.
2 weeks.
Easter Sunday service with some friends, and the pastor was talking about social justice, and I about rolled out of the.
She came right to our
church. It was.
So we're in second
Not
Sunday.
pumped.
We were at second Sunday in Lent. Our Easter's actually later. And what's going on? We don't have it till May 5th. But I mean, it's just different. I don't know why I said that, but like I didn't celebrate Easter last week.
Oh,
so like when
pagan.
people were like,
How
"Oh man,
could
like
you?
it's Transgender Day on Easter Day," I'm like, "Not mine. I don't know."
Sucks to be you.
Mine is on Cinco de Mayo. Only God would do something so beautiful.
It's very inclusive.
You can have
Very
margaritas on
inclusive of you.
Easter.
Hey, think about it, Liam.
Oh my gosh.
Liam, if your algorithm starts changing, let me know.
It's the prayers.
So
Cinco de
I have
Pascha,
I have one more video on this from these guys.
Oh, another one.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
one more.
Man, look at that hair. Look at
crushing
that
it.
guy.
That's why his hat's got to be on so loose.
Is that a shot? Because I'm bald. Is that what's going on?
No, I was just saying you had a huge head. You were saying he had a huge head, and then that's why he's
Is that
got
what your verbal pistol whipping is about this right?
Yeah, go fuck
This
yourself.
is like, well, you're bald.
So
You're bald.
you don't have hair. What do you think of that?
You're broke.
How do you like me now?
How do you feel? He has so much more hair than you. Okay,
Jealous.
let's go.
He has a nose.
Have you ever heard of the Rebbe?
No.
So this man started this sect of Orthodox Judaism. So this man was the rabbi. He became a mentor of Netanyahu, Israel's U.S. ambassador, in 1984. The Rebbe was speaking to Netanyahu, and he said, "Since we last met, many things have progressed. What hasn't changed, however, is that the Messiah still hasn't come. So do something to hasten his coming." A couple years later, he told Netanyahu that he would one day become prime minister of Israel and be the nation's last leader before handing the scepter to the Messiah. 2009, became prime minister and was elected out in 2021. But then a few months later, he was reinstated. This time, he fully aligned himself with the ultra-Orthodox and the Zionists. A lot of them are very anti-Palestinian residing within Israel. If we're talking about the temple being rebuilt, the Muslims having claim of the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount, the Zionist party wants that out of there. Netanyahu has definitely aligned himself with the Zionist party.
And if it gets touched, war.
Yes. Have you ever?
Ninjas or butterflies?
I got some quibbles, but that's not important. It is
All right,
interesting.
I have a critique. Since you asked why our clips don't look like that, I at least make you sound good.
Thank you.
There were a lot of icky cuts that I did not
He's
like.
got criticisms.
I agree. The audio was rough.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bennett, you do a great job.
Let's not bash on these guys. They just had a major viral clip.
Well, I meant that you did a good
Congrats,
job.
guys. I like your hair.
What messed with my mind, and this will get me fired. What messed with my mind is that I saw like the young Netanyahu. I'm like, oh my God, is that Blinken? And I was like, that's right. You couldn't tell the difference because half of our people are dual citizens and on their cabinet. That's not fake. Look that up. You know that's real.
Well,
And
yeah.
so I was like, oh my God, is that Blinken? Like, no, it's Netanyahu Young. Like they look the same. That's fine. It's terrible. But what's more terrible is that he's our Department of State and actually on their government as well. How does that work?
Well, and also,
how does that work?
Blinken has a lot of ties. Has a bunch of ties to Epstein through his family too, and there's a lot of hypothecations about Epstein being a Mossad guy, right? Like, there's a lot of like incestual.
We don't know that's real, right?
What?
We're still speculating.
We're
still speculating. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know.
We don't know. We don't have the evidence yet.
Come on, man. Yeah, I mean, he could have been doing a lot of things on that island that just happens to look like the Jewish flag. He could have been doing a lot of those things.
The colors are suspicious,
Israeli
but
temple.
lots of things are white and blue.
Yeah, the third
to be
temple was
fair.
built on that island the way it looked. You know what I mean? Like, jeez. But so, like, these.
Oh my God. It's a pretty big island, guys. There's lots of buildings on it. It's not all just that.
Bill Clinton was just going there to golf.
Yeah, I'm sure.
What I'm saying is, like, most
Joe's escaping. He's out. He's just leaving.
Like, most of this crap is used by people like, not this guy, I like this guy, but most of this crap is used by people just getting power, right? This is not what people actually believe. That's a misrepresentation of the Orthodox Jewish faith, and that's not what's really going on.
They're actually Zionists. His other ones seem more accurate from what I've read from other articles. His actual ways splitting Zionism isn't as about the third temple as he's kind of represented it.
It's not.
He might give you the impression, and I don't think he's trying to mislead, but I think it might give you the impression that all Zionists are third temple types. That's not true for everybody. In fact, not all.
Lot are,
but there
though.
is a difference between the ultra-Orthodox and Orthodox. Ultra-Orthodox is highly associated. If I understand, I read a Haaretz article that was talking about is specifically that, like how ultra-Orthodox has changed substantially over the last 20 years and become far more about the third temple than it used to be traditionally.
That wasn't the point I'm making, but let me say one thing. The ultra in front of the Orthodox, like, that's not what they say. Like, there's Orthodox Judaism. So there's many sects of Orthodox Judaism. We're called.
They have denominations just like Christians.
The other thing I would say, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is people put on the tiny hats for propaganda purposes. Just like, so let me help out my liberal friends. Let me help my liberal friends out. Like Putin. No. Let me go on my own. Like, listen. Like, they know what they got. Let me attack my own kind.
Yeah.
Like, Putin spreads Orthodox propaganda to fight the war. That's undeniably true to me.
For sure.
Like, you say stuff that sounds very Orthodox of you to get your people unified to fight this war.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what's happening. And so people who do that are despicable to me. Like, they're monsters. Like,
I mean,
it's a clear manipulation, leveraging the most sacred part, like the most noble part of people to do something
100%.
horrendous.
Well,
so that's your point. I think
that's
it's
my
true.
point.
It's a great moral point.
Something that's
For
never
sure.
talked about enough with the creation of Israel is how much the USSR was involved with it. Stalin was a staunch Zionist until he wasn't, because Israel ended up kind of turning on him and then going westward. The original idea was like Stalin and all these types within his government, they were incredibly pro-Zionist and were funding the original warfare for their takeover of the state. And it wasn't until afterwards where it went to the West, and then he started purging out all the Jews out of his cabinet, right? Like, and nobody really talks but it's like manipulation for the sake of we want it to be a socialist Eastern Bloc state.
I've never heard that.
Also,
But that is the history of
Interesting.
it, right?
he also
That was exactly right.
The church up until that point, like the Orthodox Church in Russia, was completely persecuted. Well, guess what? Around World War II, all of a sudden it was allowed to you know what I mean?
We're not allowed to talk about that, though. Like, that apparently has been scrubbed from history.
Yeah, you're not allowed to talk about the genocide of Orthodox Christians. Like the Ukraine
Well,
war.
wait. Importantly, it was just mentioned specifically by Candace Owens in that interview where she says the biggest Holocaust in history was against the Christians in the USSR.
Because the Bolsheviks were largely a bunch of atheist Jews that were very anti-religion. Like, it wasn't necessarily like the Jewish religious
ethnically
aspect. They were
Jews,
ethnically Jews.
but Marxist in nature. And Marx was very anti-religion. It's the opiate of the masses. It exists to reinforce bourgeois capitalism. That's one of the reasons why you got to get rid of it. It was banned as a state, and then along with a lot of other things, and then had to be reintroduced later as they needed an identity. That wasn't Marxism.
I will participate in the atrocity Olympics right now. Like, for example, like holy, like the Russian martyrs.
Getting up on the cross right now. He's
Just carrying my burden.
The Russian martyrs far outweighed in numbers, and I think even by percentage, than when the Romans persecuted the Christians during the worst of it. Like there was so much more death and awfulness, and also the Spanish Civil War, another fact. So like there's been a lot of that. But what I will say is I don't think that's the right way to look. Again, I don't know how the numbers are calculated. Somebody else can calculate them for anybody. Like the amount of like again, people. The point is like just not talking.
Right. Yeah, right. It's that it's unknown that generally the atrocities of the USSR are just under taught and
It's supposed to be 20 million.
Not well
for
understood.
The Orthodox Christian.
Right. The question is how much of that is because they're a Christian? How much of that is because they happen to be kulaks or property owners or various different other categories? But we do know
Cultural
that the
Christians?
USSR was hostile to religion because of it being surrounded by the Marxist ideology. So there was no doubt that there was an intense persecution of Christians in the USSR. The question is how much out of the 60 million people who died, how much was because of bad socialist planning, how much because of a clear persecution, et
but
cetera,
the
et
interesting, going down a school of thought and compartmentalizing this a little bit, an interesting thing is how much those people from the Bolshevik Revolution now play currently a role in American foreign policy.
with the neoconservative movement.
With the neoconservatives coming from Trotsky, who again, atheist Jew from the Bolshevik Revolution.
They're usually that.
Right. And they all happen to be dispensationalists, right?
It's very odd.
It's very interesting how that continues to always work out that way.
Is it confusing? Is your left brain going crazy?
So let me ask you,
Bennett.
actually, the history here. Dispensationalism, was it more popular after World War II than it was before?
No, this is dispensationalism. Was like they had like a rival in America, and a lot of that was dispensationalism.
So like that would give a lot of credence to the
past Civil War.
It seems to me that there was a cultural kind of hijacking that happened after like the legend of World War II that happened. And that's where the dispensationalism kind of really took off. That's what it seems to me in like Christian culture, like the cultural Christians, right? Because like most people aren't actually like actively reading all the stuff, and like, but there's like a culture that kind of took over, which ended up merging, I think, a lot of the Judaic and Christian thought, and that's where we get Judeo-Christian, right?
Right.
Like, that's where we get that idea.
Exactly where that goes. So like,
it'd be more accurate to say Christian pagan values.
Well, Christian.
No, but Judeo-Christian comes out of World War II.
No, I know. I'm agreeing with you.
You say Christian culture, and that like. Yes, I'm going to say agree that Judaism, like Judeo-Christian, comes out of that unity or whatever. But, I mean, we already talked about it, like the 30 Years' War, like you had two different Christian cultures going to war. In fact, in Ukraine right now, you have two different Orthodox Christian cultures because they both are Orthodox. They're just slaughtering each other over, territory in a lot of ways. And there's a lot going on there, so it's tough to
American foreign policy is what they're slaughtering each other over.
Again, that's a big weight in the matrix, right? There's a lot going on there.
Right.
So, like, you have, when you say Christian culture is difficult, because what do you really mean by that? Western Christian culture, West meaning Europe and America, most of the time it's Protestant culture. That's what we're talking about. A little Catholic in there, but not really.
You just don't like being included with the Protestants. You're like, it's not Christian culture, it's Protestant culture.
Well,
You're like defining difference.
What I'm saying is that's
very left brain.
That is our.
It's a subculture of the higher culture.
That is what Christian culture is
genus
to
and
us.
species.
That is so like it feels very alienating to me when we talk about it, because like I don't subscribe to that kind of stuff. Which is fine.
Well, to be clear, though, to be fair, Adam, if you look at like a lot of the writing that we get about what America was like from the Revolution to the Progressive Era, and like that we kind of define as what the American institutions kind of grew out of and into, all Protestant, right? So when they're talking about that, what they mean is that unique part of that, and they're
the
just
Enlightenment is Protestant.
using a shorthand. I mean, anti-Catholic. A lot of that era, very anti-Catholic. I don't know what their orientation was toward Orthodox, but.
Well, a lot of it's just not knowing.
Such a small minority, probably really
not. Well, there wasn't much going on.
Loud minority.
Well, and you weren't loud minorities. But the Irish were, to be clear. So like the anti-Catholicism was a big part of that, right? So that battle, like, it wasn't that we were always good, tolerant folks. Actually, we have Gangs of New York as an example, right? Where you have like ethnic groups that are battling each other out repeatedly, over and over again, all throughout that century. The trick about tolerance, the trick about the idea that we shouldn't be battling in the streets over ideas of the right doctrine for God, is a continuous battle that we have to fight over and over and over again to try to de-escalate and bring things down. that's it's a continual norm that you have to re-encourage, because the natural thing for humans is to do that, right? That's what we're created to do. It's like our fundamental drive is to divide into tribes and then battle.
Well, I've heard a good way to try de-escalate, at least. Like, there's a lot of yes, but in the West, right? And really, if you think about, at least my tradition or other traditions, and Hinduism does this, Buddhism does this, it's more like yes and, right? So the yes and is more of a peaceful peacemaker way to think about it.
Would you say, like,
yes? What you're saying is yes, and this other thing, and those things together mean this higher.
Yeah, you're like
thing.
Same story, different. What was it that you said to me that one time? Same story, different.
Same story, all true. It's from Pirates of the Caribbean. That's what I got. That's like the best English version.
Can you say it in like the Caribbean accent, and that would make it a little better?
Listen, sorry, listen. Like I heard it was because he was like the tentacle guy.
Yeah, right.
Davy Jones.
The tentacle guy to Davy Jones. Like, I heard it because of a lady. Like, I heard it because he fell in love with the seas. Like, same story, different versions. Because she's the god of the sea, right? She's a lady. That's what that meant. So, like, yes, you have this integration of reality, but you can separate it into two different perspectives, right? Yeah. Which is what the Trinity is. We're not going to get into that right now.
This has been the deepest dive into religion that this podcast has ever
I knew
done.
this was coming, unfortunately. I
Did
felt
you?
it in my bones, and I was like, I am not even close to qualified to talk about this.
No one
That's what I
qualified.
expected.
We're just having a good time.
I want to hear you psychoanalyze things, talk about neuroscience, talk about the quackery in psychology, and then get into some of this like symbolism stuff. That's what I want to hear.
Symbolism.
Like the cosmic tree, and no, it's flat Earth. Actually, that's what's going on.
Oh, you want to get into that?
Oh, sick, dude. Let's go there. Let's go there.
There's no time limit on this.
Oh, okay.
Unless you have a time
We
limit.
got 2 minutes.
Until Joe falls asleep.
So yeah, like you could pull it up.
You did send it in Discord, didn't you?
I did. So this is actually not ubiquitous. I wouldn't say something like that, but like close to ubiquitous as a symbol of how reality is. It's there's like a tree of life, and like the world we live in is flat, right? In the sense of our experience. He's about to pull it up. I'm just trying to like dead air time this.
Like, what does the tree look like? How many leaves are on it?
So like this is what we're talking about. So like
this is what most of the podcast is dead air filling while I get things up.
That's what she said.
Right. So we say like so like they would say, okay, listen, this is what reality truly is like. Like I can't describe this entire picture. But
I do like that there's an ice wall.
Exactly.
That's Antarctica.
That's
right?
like a straight
That's
tree.
Antarctica.
It actually.
So I actually think a lot of flat Earth conspiracy pulled imagery like this to be like, oh, this is what's going on. And so like when you think of the material space, that is the flatness. So if I compress 3D down into, or maybe 4D if you're going to put time in there, this is where that flat layer is. Right?
4D's the snake, right? The time is snake.
Well, there's a lot of symbolism with the snake. So the snake, because the snake's eating its own tail, and so this is where you're not going to like. But like what I would say.
Why do you keep subscribing to me what I like and don't like? I love Ouroboros. Come on now.
I'm really getting at the tension
Aes
between
Sedai.
anarchy and tyranny. So this is the snake eating its own tail, in the sense that once we get too much tyranny, we're going to get anarchy. Once we get too much anarchy, we get tyranny.
So where are we on that spectrum right now? Are we headed for anarchy?
I think we're. Oh yeah.
We're at literal anarcho.
We're just
like-
careening towards
Yeah,
anarchy.
we're basically anarcho-tyranny.
Snake
We're
choking
not
on that
quite
knocked
this.
tail. Like that is where we're at. He's choking right
It
now.
looks like Mia Khalifa on a tail right there.
What'd you say?
Whoa.
Making jokes over here.
Wow.
Jokes.
It works on so many levels.
Keeping the viewers interested. All two of them.
All two of you. But I mean, anyway,
We were told that we deserve 10,000 viewers.
We were.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zaku, for that.
Thank you. So the symbolism is this is like reality symbolized. If you.
All right, so help me understand. So you got the mountain in the middle that goes to a tree that then you hop on a rainbow and you go into the roots of the tree.
I'm not
With
gonna
LeVar
describe
Burton.
the entire. This is like one version.
But
of
I
it.
don't understand. I don't understand any of this. So you got to help me understand.
Go on a rainbow
you
bridge
can
to
think of,
Asgard.
like the,
Dave has
so-
trouble opening his right brain to these things.
All right. So
Well, no, I'm trying to understand.
let me
Dude,
ask
take
you
a
this.
look. It's in a book, okay?
Where's the underworld in this picture?
Well, I would suggest that it would be the roots of the tree.
Like on the bottom.
In
The
a very-
soil.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
the-
And
where the
where's
snakes
where's
are?
the heavens at in this picture?
Where all the snakes are.
Probably
The tops of the tree leaves.
Right.
Actually,
That's where the monkeys come from. So it's like
well, I don't know.
Genetic
I'm-
memory?
I'm just thinking of Norse mythology for
This
this
is
whole
North.
thing.
This is North
Oh,
mythology.
The tree of
Okay.
Yggdrasil.
Yep.
Yggdrasil.
That's what it is.
Today, Junior.
So it's a combination of pagan and
Got to put that on there.
Yeah,
Christian
I
what
have it
I'm
written
saying
down.
is
symbolism.
Which is what 1,000 years ago basically happened.
This is what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Like, this is not unique to Norse mythology. This is true about Semitic theology or theology from like Judaism, like Second Temple Judaism. This is true in the Chinese and the like. People think of the reality in this way across these separated cultures. Is what I'm saying. And so when you look at something like this, like when you think about symbols, like the symbol can transgress through the fractal reality that we actually live in, if that makes sense. Like this symbol represents how reality works at this level versus this level. So like the pattern is what's true maybe at a higher scale and also at a lower scale. Does that make sense to you?
What's the? Give me an example of a higher and lower scale.
So the tree, like if I take a stick of that tree, like I break the stick off, it looks like a little tree. That's a fractal.
How dare you?
Okay.
Yep,
Right?
that's fair.
So how does
You shouldn't
this
do that.
enrich my understanding of being by seeing this way, as opposed to a sphere floating in the universe?
As
And
above, so below.
the mechanical view versus the
No, just I mean literally the mental model of Yggdrasil here versus the mental model of sphere flying around a sun in the universe. Like because and I'm just trying to steelman this side of this,
Sure,
just
you can
for the
steelman.
interest of the viewers. Is you're saying there's more content, moral content here, that this is more meaningful, right? And
It's
this is all your left brain sucks, right brain's awesome sort of thing. It is
Yeah,
is that
this
there's
this is an easy one.
right and just help me understand why this
Because
is
this is
more
how
content.
reality is experienced. That's why. You don't experience a floating orb going around the sun. That's not what you experience. You experience the sun going around the earth. Is what you experience.
Yeah,
Like a lot of reality is not just strict materialism of what you're
It's
seeing.
a phenomenological way to represent the world.
Okay.
Right.
Right. So how does this give you content? Like you can say like this is what people experience, but it's not true materially.
Well,
so like how does it
that
help
we
you?
know of.
Well, because material and meaning are not separate. That's what I would say. And so this is some way to symbolize the meaning along with the material. That's what I would say.
What's the symbology
But
there?
so take it all away. What do you get out of that?
What do you get? Like
So what I get out of having to be in a sphere in real reality, where it actually is that we can now send rockets to the moon to build Northrop Grumman's train.
So what it's saying is.
But
that-
I can't do that with this. To be clear.
Sure, it is. It's saying that you can do that, but you better not make sure it's a snake eating its own tail, and you better understand there's a higher and a lower way you can go down and descend. That's what it's saying.
Yeah.
Because you can descend into hell doing that purpose.
Well, and it's
Like,
similar.
why
It's
are you
similar
doing
like
that? What's the purpose?
Yeah,
of
well,
what
it's
you're
also
doing?
similar like when we build these big things, like better make sure you're not building a Tower of Babel type of situation. Like there's a symbology that exists there of this centralizing structure, and everything falls down, and then everybody has to disperse because of it, right? Like that's a very mimetic type of prophecy that exists there. Like it's a meme, as Richard Dawkins, the cultural Christian, would say. Right.
Right.
Cultural Christian would say. Right.
I still need to know why there's a rainbow bridge.
Oh, the tree?
That's where the leprechauns
So
are.
it's showing you that the root of that tree is actually a bigger tree. Like there's a fractal relationship to reality. Is what it's saying.
I think it's where Joe's people are.
Yeah,
It's
Joe's
the,
on the
it's the
bottom of the
leprechauns
tree.
at the.
He goes into the gate of the underworld down there in Hades.
Joe is
So
the
Joe-
gateway between
Joe-
Hades and the
Just
and
a
the material
bunch of
plane.
gingers
Joe
right up there.
jumps into Hades. He goes through the gate, and he's got a maze. It's kind of like Minecraft or whatever. He's going down.
You know, it's interesting. The show ends just like it began with me being bullied by nerds.
I like how the is that snakes all around the snakes all around the roots?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that the idea?
I think so. I'm not exactly sure. Like again, I think this is from North mythology. So some of this I can't.
I think there's a mixture of Gnosticism that's existing in here too.
Oh, I'm
like
sure there
I'm
is.
seeing with the snake stuff because one of the core ideas in Gnosticism is when
it's
the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Right.
Yeah, it's a serpent at the
is the
right.
serpent, but what you end up having with the knowledge of good and evil that is gained is you end up kind of having like an acceleration in evolution consciousness that kind of develops the human ego, kind of a thing.
Right. That the fall was a good thing because that's what creates humans.
Good is a complicated word.
Right.
in
But it
those
was the
types of
thing that was
things, right?
supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Maybe that's better.
Yeah. Well,
So it was. So this is.
but it also breaks you out of oneness
So
too,
so
because now you're also an individual.
It has a trade-off.
Let me blow your cortex.
Thomas Sowell Right again.
Listen, yes. Yeah. So if you're saying the way it is, like, is this supposed to happen? Like, the answer was yes.
Yeah.
Because of
It
our
happened?
nature, it had to happen.
Yeah.
Like, this is not, the fall is not a, so what do I want to say? Like, the quality of human nature is only rectified, right? So this is where Christ contextualized it for Christians. Like, the truth of the matter is, the only way to rectify the fallen human state is, like, it was going to happen. Like, it had to happen, right? And your mortality is a way to repent and become more like the goodness, right? To be like, how do we want to say it? To deify yourself, not in the I'm a God way, but I am like God way. Like, I am a part of this tree of life, right? And so that is what it's really saying. And so the whole fall is a good thing in the sense that it was set up. Like, it's not like God doesn't know what's going to happen, or else he wouldn't be God. Like, you have to understand God in that way. Like
the omniscience of it. Yeah.
Exactly. The omnipresent. Like, you have to put him at the highest level. He's not surprised about anything he created. It's not a surprise. Just like Joe's not surprised when he makes him. He's like, oh my goodness. Like, you know, like, he's not surprised. Like, this is going to be like, okay, I got to work this out. Right. So I got to work this out.
So,
You know what I mean?
yeah. So are you satisfied by the, and I know we're going long, need to pause this, maybe this is the last question, by the tree as like dealing with fundamental like racial memory sort of question? Like, Jordan Peterson actually makes this argument in his biblical lecture series that much of what we're dealing with when it comes to the symbolism of snakes was that one of our major predators as monkeys were snakes, that we developed vision because of fruit, that the tree as like higher levels of tree being heaven is the hierarchy of the tree and the tribal life of the monkey that we evolved from. Like, all these, like, that these are all patterns that play back because they're they're fundamental to our brain patterns, and that's why they're symbols that we like, is because we
also
evolved
like
from
dragons are kind of dragons and griffins and things like that are like snake, cat, dog, bird, predator things.
The
kind
ultimate
of, right?
predator,
Yeah, it's
like a compression of all the symbols of predator down to a single.
Well,
Not satisfying or satisfying?
No, it's not satisfying, because I would say a couple things. One, Jordan Peterson operates where he operates, and he has to really fit this view into evolutionary theory where it comes from, and that's a way to tell that story, right? That is a way to do that. Like, this is emergent stuff, but the symbology of that goes much bigger into like this temporal way. You know what I mean?
No, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean temporal way?
So like when you talk
like the
about
time. When you mean time, you mean temporal. You mean time. You mean like the time.
Like the only reason this is true is because we evolved from all this caveman stuff.
He didn't say the only. It's just a reason.
A reason.
Yeah.
Right. So okay, like you could say something like that.
Right.
Right. Or you could say this is how the ancients understood or how they were delivered, how reality actually functions. Right.
Okay.
So
what would make them any more right than what we know in terms of evidence of evolution and evolutionary biology?
Like when you say like evidence in what way? Like like what do you mean? Like,
so
I'm looking at this material.
No.
thing?
I'm just saying if you make a true statement claim, the ancients believed it, and I believe that, right? I think it's an interesting and accurate model. And then saying, well, that model patterns on evolutionary psychology, biology, whatever, and therefore I find that also interesting and fascinating.
Yeah.
Like that these don't seem mutually exclusive, but
Sure.
it seems like you're kind of setting up as if they have to be.
Well, you could say the same thing about, like, let's say you go to Hinduism who say, well, Christ was just a yogi. Like, that's what you're doing when you do that. Like, I'm
Right.
going to fit this into this pattern structure I already know.
Right.
And I'm going to fit this underneath it. Right. So it's
Right.
really a context of what's the higher
It seems like a fractal.
It seems like a fractal. So if you want to put Christ underneath the material reality
Right.
aspect of things, then that's what you're going to do.
Or at least the reason that the cosmology is so universal or used so often, right? You're doing what's that guy's name? The archaeologist, as he's like noticing these patterns.
Graham Hancock?
Graham
Graham
Hancock.
Hancock,
You're doing a Graham Hancock where you're just kind of like patterning all the religious
which is
structures
another
and
example of why all these things need to come together, because there's a lot of different fields that are doing a
and
bunch of things, right?
interdisciplinary and trying to integrate.
Again, like, you have to be a little charitable to our ancient predecessors for a lot of reasons. They didn't have
Right.
the revelation we have. Again, like
Mm-hmm.
like knowledge is revealed over time, right, to us. And so to go back to, just like when you talk about people like, oh, they were racist back in 1700. Like,
Right.
well, like they didn't have the benefit of knowing what we know now with all the things. And so if you're going to judge them on our standards, like, who are you?
Right.
Like, how dare you, right? Like, again, you're just eating from the tree. You know what I mean? So when it comes to, like, here's a scare cow, like, dragons are like dinosaurs, right? Because what else were the ancient going to believe? When they describe the serpent, that's an experience they have of this monster, right? That's in their lives. They describe it as, oh, that has these things. And then they, like, dinosaur bones aren't original. They didn't just start popping up, and like, people would trip on these things. What'd you think they were going to think? You know what I mean? Like, what would you call them if you were them? Like, you would call them dragons. Like, oh, this must be what dragons look like. And then you see the imagery, right? But it's the experience phenomenological part of the dragon that you should really focus on. And that's what I'm saying with this, like, phenomenologically, what reality's like for your spot. And then, again, maybe I'll tie a bow in it, but, like, if you go down the Dawkins Road or all these people, and it's not just Dawkins, it's a lot of serious scientists, where consciousness actually becomes the root of reality, not material space. And once you get there, then it's tough to ignore phenomenological experience as the root of actual reality.
There becomes more than just the material plane that we live on. There's more to reality than just, like, the five senses necessarily. Like, there's something about the experience, and that's what phenomenology, psychology is like, it's the phenomenon that you're experiencing, right? And, like, I think the deeper you dig, the more you're like, ooh, the world is much crazier and more complicated than we actually think, and no amount of material, like, oh, we get all the variables together. Like, there's a knowledge problem. There's a Hayekian knowledge problem in the way that we have humans, right? I don't know if it would. Well, yeah, I mean, emergent is like a very religious word, I think, to a lot of people. So I don't really know what people mean by that sometimes.
I mean, it's difficult to categorize because it is interrelated, interreacting, and happening not by a central source, by a decentralized source, meaning everyone's experience. So, and then like the fractaling of that. So it's hard to pinpoint a singular cause. That's what emergent means. It's just the opposite of a singular cause.
Yeah, it's kind of just like, and then there was a big bang. Like, that's what emergent means to me. Like, it's just like, there's not really a whole lot of substance behind the word.
Well, it's like looking for, like, the little man controlling your brain, right? So, like,
homunculus.
Yeah, a homunculus, right? So a homunculus is an example of a skyhook or a singular cause that explains everything, right? Or there's only one virtue, and that's equity, right? That's another, like...
That's what emergent feels to me. It feels like it's like a skyhook to grab.
No. Emergent's the opposite of that, right?
It just feels like another skyhook.
I get what you're saying, that you're saying, like, that's used that way, but what I would deposit is, like, what Hayek meant, what most of the people who coined the term and, like, you know, are... developed it when it comes to economics and social science. What they meant was, a lot of people look at social phenomena and they say it has this cause and only this cause and this one cause. And like, well, actually, it's more complicated. And actually, it happened because of many actors, and they had this set of incentives, and it affected this million people who all had this. And they're saying there's something about that isn't singular, and that's why it's emergent. It comes up from the bottom rather than being imposed top down.
You can cut us off whenever you want, but what I would say to David, like, yeah, that's the Western mind. Like, let me go everything down to the bottom, and everything has to be generated up. That's
not the Western mind at all.
Sure, it is. It's breaking everything apart and then putting it in, like, it's a bottom-up emergent effect.
Well,
that's
so
how reality.
I would agree. I would agree. Reason and rationality breaks things apart, but emergent is actually an incorporative phenomena, right? That is largely like it's actually. It has always been a minority view fighting against the majority view, which is everything is centrally planned and everything has a central singular cause, right? John Rawls wrote that there's only one virtue, equity, right? Who disagreed with him? Robert Nozick, who said, actually, there's a couple other ones, right? I mean, like that idea that there's singulars is Western. Emergent's actually been trying to fight that for about 150 years.
No, I say no.
As far as in the social sciences, I can't tell you about psychology
that's
and
what I'm
neuroscience.
saying. It's broken apart. No, it's not even social science. Like, if you're saying there's a singular cause, I'd say, yeah, that's what God is, right? And so when you break it apart like that, when you say that's not true,
sure,
and I look at it from this way, then you've taken him out of the picture. You've killed him, as Nietzsche said, right? Like, he's gone.
But once again, like, you can't explain. So if you can go there, and I think any one of those people, like, yeah, on a metaphysical level, okay, you can say that. You could say gravity caused the price of wheat to go up in November of last year, or you could say that the phenomena of the individual actors in farming and purchasing of wheat had a certain dynamic, and describe those in emergent terms that happened not because God said the price will go down, but probably because all of them had a drought that had a very specific effect on the nature of prices and supply and demand. That is the point of what I'm saying is emergent. In a way to understand emergent that isn't a singular cause.
One would say those are one and the same. I heard it the other
No,
day.
I know they do. But you have to understand, like, by taking that away, you're taking away one of the most important observations of social science that
I'm not taking it away.
in 200 years, right? By saying,
and
but you could just
what I'm
say
saying-
that's God, and I'm like, well, that's a reduction. Actually, you're removing the content at that point.
If I may, this is already solved.
Okay.
This is solved in the Trinity, the unity and multiplicity problem. Again, like if you hyper focus on the multiplicity, and it emerges the unity, right? You reject reality, in my opinion. And also, if you focus on the unity and reject the multiplicity, you also reject reality, right? And so reality is really this breathing in and breathing out of unity and multiplicity, as I've heard it said before. And so when I say that, like when you say individuals make up a community, I would say no, communities make individuals and individuals make up a community. It is the same.
I agree with you.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, like, that is the way I'm trying to talk
you
about
guys
it.
you guys think your opponent is Hayek, but your opponent is Kant. Right, you.
I reject them both, so I don't care.
I agree. The opponent is Kant. I agree with that. I'm a Nietzschean in that sense.
You're over here saying.
I don't mind either one.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, sure.
Right, you're over here attacking reason and rationale. Okay, that's fine. There's ways to attack that, but you're doing so by saying, well, there is a central cause, and like, well, okay, there's a level of explanation that I can understand that on, and then there's also the singularity has like the individual in it too, and when you kind of break that apart, you say, well, that is not important, right?
I didn't say it wasn't important.
Well, I know. I'm just only saying that if that's what the conclusion is, right? If you say emergent bad or emergent means not that, I'm like, well, that's not the way I would conceptualize that, because actually I think it actually works for your argument more than it fights against it.
In my phenomenology, in my experience, the way that it tends to be used is it just becomes a skyhook.
It can be, yeah.
Like, and it in most cases, like 99% of the time I hear it, it becomes just the skyhook for people to go. It's like, oh yeah, that's what it is, right?
Maybe in neuroscience and psychology, right? But that's not at all in economics or philosophy.
But even when I hear, like, I have this problem with libertarians, as somebody who would self-describe myself as a libertarian typically, is that there's a lot of like grasping onto certain terms that exist, but then when it actually comes to how they actually experience the world, they don't actually use those terms, even though I think that they're correct. Like it's like libertarians like forget about the knowledge problem all the time, it seems like. Or like they forget about like this or that principle, which I actually think are like really good principles to use. So it's like there's like a meaning crisis in kind of the way the words are used, like because you use that terminology, right? Where it's like they're like correct, but they're also not correct because they don't actually act on the thing that I think they're correct on, right? Like there's something that happens there. There's like a disconnect for some reason.
Can I interject? I actually have to go soon.
Yeah. No, we're about.
Well, we're over time.
Yeah.
We're well over time, but it's been a great conversation, and I think we should
put a pin in it.
We should carry
One
the
person
conversation.
left who's actually listening to this?
There's actually 5 people right now.
Hey,
and we should continue.
Is it like Zoom where they put mute on the camera and the audio? Like, yeah,
Yes.
I'm totally at the meeting. Guys.
Yes, they put up a still of them like sitting, but it's like if they froze.
Oh, Sam wants by the way, Sam just wants us to make this world map for D&D podcast.
Oh, totally.
There you go. Nice.
There you go.
Yeah.
That would reflect reality, David.
Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to continue the conversation in the Discord. There's a link in the chat right up there, just a little ways. Join the Discord if you haven't. David, special guest Adam Thune, thank you for being here, my friend. Kyle Mack, Bennett on the buttons. My name's Joe Sheehan. Everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one. We'll be doing these once a month or so, and the next one will hopefully be coming to you actually from the Timberline Lounge. So we'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Peace.
Dude, that video was tripping me.